Hey everyone, tonight we're slipping back through the dusty gates of time beyond the roar of traffic and the glow of screens to a world where life was cheap, fame was fleeting, and a good death was the ultimate prize. You're standing at the entrance to a Roman gladiatorial school, ludus. The air thick with the scent of sweat leather and something else, something iron. The sounds of distant shouting and the rhythmic thud of wooden swords fill the air, a constant reminder of the brutal reality awaiting you. You probably won't survive a day in a Roman ludus without a very strong constitution and an even stronger sense of humor. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling adventurous, drop a comment below with your location and local time. It's always fascinating to see where everyone's tuning in from. You can also like and follow the channel to ensure you're right here with us for the next exciting installments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've just arrived at the ludus, perhaps sold into slavery, maybe a prisoner of war, or even a free man desperate enough to sign away your rights for a gladiatorial contract. This is your new gladiator's life. And it begins not with a roar from the crowd, but with the grim, unyielding reality of the training grounds. Forget the glorious battles you've seen in movies. This is where the real work and real hardship starts. A mainstream historical fact you immediately learn is that a luda was essentially a specialized training academy for gladiators, often privately owned by a lanista gladiator trainer, their owner. These institutions were highly disciplined, almost like military barracks, but with a singular focus on preparing men for combat in the arena. You'd find them in major Roman cities, sometimes sprawling compounds with their own training grounds, barracks, and even infirmaries. It's like a very intense sports academy, except the final exam could be fatal. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the initial assessment for a new recruit wasn't just about physical strength. It also involved a rudimentary medical examination. The lanista would check for existing injuries or weaknesses, effectively assessing your combat viability. Imagine a grizzled trainer poking and prodding you, muttering about your dental hygiene or the state of your knees. Good shoulders, but those flat feet will be a problem when you're running from a lion. Still, you'll do. This careful vetting was practical. A healthy gladiator was a valuable asset, less likely to die prematurely and waste the owner's investment. Historians still argue whether this medical checkup was primarily for profit or had any genuine concern for the recruit's well-being. Your arrival isn't met with fanfare, but with a harsh introduction to the hierarchy. You're just a tiro, a novice. You're immediately stripped of your old identity, given basic rough-spun clothing, and assigned to a group of fellow recruits. The language barrier might be daunting if you're a foreigner, but the universal language of commands and discipline is quickly understood. You begin to grasp that your past means nothing here. Your future is forged in the sweat and pain. The immediate mood is one of overwhelming discipline and a pervasive sense of dread mixed with a faint, almost desperate flicker of hope. You see the veteran gladiators, their bodies scarred, their eyes hard, but with an undeniable presence. They are the ones who have survived, the living proof that this brutal existence can be endured, at least for a time. You realize quickly that obedience is not optional. It's the only path to not being beaten before you even see the arena. You are introduced to the doctores, the trainers who specialize in different gladiator types, each wielding a long disciplinary rod. These aren't just drill sergeants. They are experts in their craft, teaching you the precise footwork, shield work, and swordplay specific to your assigned gladiator class. It's a steep learning curve where mistakes are met not with gentle corrections, but with sharp blows and shouted insults. You learn quickly that every movement, every stance is a matter of life and death. You're not just learning to fight, you're learning to survive. Your living quarters are pointed out, a cramped space probably shared with several others. The smell of unwashed bodies, stale straw, and something acrid hangs in the air. This is your new home, your prison, and your only path to a potential, if unlikely, future. You look around, seeing the faces of your fellow recruits, fear, resignation, and a glimmer of defiance in their eyes. You are all in this together, bound by the contract and the terrifying distant promise of the arena. This is the harsh new life you've signed up for or been condemned to. Emerging from the initial shock of your arrival at the ludus, you're quickly plunged into the relentless rhythm of Dawan morning routines training drills. The dawn breaks not with birdsong, but with the sharp crack of a whip and the guttural shouts of the doctors. You quickly learn that your body is no longer your own. It's a tool and it must be honed to perfection, day in and day out, regardless of aches or exhaustion. This is where the grim alchemy of turning a raw recruit into a fighting machine truly begins. A mainstream historical fact you grasp is that gladiatorial training was incredibly systematic and specialized, often mimicking military drills. Recruits were taught to fight with specific weapons and armor sets corresponding to different gladiator types like the Marmermello, the Thrax, or the Rotirius. You'd be assigned a fighting style early on, often based on your physique strength or agility, and then drilled endlessly in its particular techniques. Imagine learning to wield a heavy, scutum-large shield and gladius short sword against a simulated opponent, sweat stinging your eyes as you repeat the same parry and thrust hundreds of times. Every move was precise, every stance critical, honed through painful repetition. Now for a quirky tidbit, gladiators initially trained with the wooden weapons that were twice the weight of their actual arena counterparts. This seemingly sadistic practice was designed to build incredible strength and endurance, making the real weapons feel light and manageable by comparison. Imagine swinging a massive wooden sword, your muscles screaming in protest, knowing that the actual sword you'd fight with would feel like a feather. You might hear a trainer barking, "Again, Tiro! If you can't lift this, how will you lift the crowd's expectations?" Historians still argue whether this added weight was primarily for strength building or also served as a psychological toughening mechanism. Your dawn-to-dusk physical conditioning is brutal. You start with calisthenics, running laps, and jumping exercises to build stamina. Then come the weapon drills. You'd spend hours practicing against a palasorn, a wooden post fixed in the ground, swinging your practice weapon with precise angles and footwork, imagining a roaring crowd and a flesh-and-blood opponent. This isn't about brute force, it's about technique, balance, and controlled aggression. You learn to conserve energy, to feint, to find the weak points in an opponent's defense. The sounds of the training ground are a constant cacophony, the rhythmic thud of swords hitting the palace, the grunts of exertion, the sharp cries of the doctors, and the occasional clang of steel as veteran gladiators spar. The air is always dusty, filled with the scent of sweat wood and dry earth. You learn to ignore the pain, to push through the burning in your muscles, knowing that this daily torment is your only path to survival. Each doctor was a master of their specific gladiator type, having likely been a successful gladiator themselves. They would demonstrate the moves with terrifying efficiency, then demand flawless replication. Mistakes weren't just corrected verbally. A missed block might result in a sharp crack of a rod against your shin, reminding you of the real consequences of failure. It's a harsh form of pedagogy, but undeniably effective. You also engage in mock combat with fellow recruits using blunted weapons. These aren't just drills, they're tests revealing who has the potential to become a formidable fighter and who might be destined for an early grave. You learn to trust your instincts to read your opponent and to find that primal edge that could mean the difference between life and death. The bonds of camaraderie begin to form here amidst the shared pain and exhaustion, recognizing that the person across from you today might save your life in the arena tomorrow. The physical demands are relentless, pushing your body to its absolute limits. You probably collapse onto your straw mat each night, every muscle aching, dreaming of barley gruel and the impossible lightness of a real sword. Yet with each passing day, you feel a subtle shift, a hardening of your muscles, a sharpening of your senses. You are becoming something new, something formidable forged in the crucible of the ludus. This is the grim reality of gladiatorial training, a continuous cycle of breaking down and rebuilding, preparing you for the moment you step into the arena. From the relentless rhythm of training drills, your focus now shifts to perhaps the most unusual and often debated aspect of gladiatorial life, their diet and discipline, barley and bruises. You might imagine hulking meat-fed warriors gorging on roasted boar and fine wine. The reality, however, was far more mundane, more specialized, and surprisingly plant-based. Your meals, precisely portioned and prepared, are designed not for pleasure, but for peak physical conditioning and resilience in the face of brutal combat. A mainstream historical fact you'll quickly learn is that gladiators were often referred to as hordearii, which literally means barley eaters. Their primary staple was indeed barley, consumed in various forms like gruel porridge or unleavened bread. This wasn't because meat was unavailable or disliked, but because barley was cheap, provided sustained energy, and was believed to contribute to a thick layer of subcutaneous fat. You might find yourself staring at another bowl of bland barley porridge, dreaming of a juicy Roman sausage, but you eat it because every calorie is fuel for survival. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the reason for this emphasis on fat wasn't about making them look chubby. It was believed to provide a protective layer against cuts and slashes. Imagine a thick, cushiony layer of fat acting as natural padding, protecting vital organs from shallow blade wounds. It was like wearing internal body armor, a squishy natural defense mechanism. You might joke if you dared about finally being able to use those love handles for something useful. My fat, doctor, it is for protection. Historians still argue about the true effectiveness of this fat layer versus actual muscle for absorbing impact, but the belief was certainly pervasive. Your one specific, often peculiar gladiatorial diet went beyond just barley. You'd also consume a significant amount of legumes like beans and lentils, providing protein and fiber. Vegetables such as cabbage and onions were also part of the regimen, ensuring you received necessary vitamins. This high-carbohydrate, mostly vegetarian diet would be surprisingly familiar to modern endurance athletes, though perhaps less appetizingly prepared. No fancy protein shakes here, just raw, unyielding fuel. To supplement their mineral intake, especially after intense training sessions that led to profuse sweating, gladiators also drank a peculiar ash drink. This concoction, likely made from plant ash mixed with vinegar and water, was rich in calcium, a vital electrolyte for bone strength and muscle function. You'd probably eye the murky grayish liquid with suspicion, but gulp it down knowing it was essential for recovery. It's like an ancient, less than delicious sports drink designed to put back what your body lost in the dirt. You can almost hear a gladiator grimacing. This is worse than a defeat, but at least my bones won't snap. The must discipline extended to every aspect of your consumption. Meals were likely eaten communally under strict supervision, ensuring no one overindulged or held back. There was no room for personal preferences or picky eaters. You ate what you were given when you were given it, because your body was a weapon and weapons needed precise fueling. This regimen, while restrictive, allowed the lanista to maintain precise control over the gladiator's physical condition. You'd feel the constant tension between hunger and the need for optimal performance. The diet wasn't about enjoyment. It was about maximizing your chances of survival in the arena. Every bruise, every pulled muscle from training was a reminder that your physical form was constantly being pushed to its limits, and your diet was there to help you recover and prepare for the next challenge. Historians still argue about the overall caloric intake of gladiators. Was it truly a starvation diet to maintain agility, or a high-calorie regimen to build mass? Evidence suggests it varied based on gladiator type and individual needs, but the consistent theme was calculated nutrition for combat performance. You realize that even for the most fearsome warriors, the mundane details of daily sustenance were paramount, ensuring they were ready for their moment in the spotlight. This dedicated attention to your barley and bruises ensures that your body is a resilient, if somewhat unglamorous machine. It's a stark contrast to the opulence associated with the games themselves, a reminder that behind the spectacle lay a rigorous, unyielding daily grind fueled by unappetizing but effective sustenance. Every bite of barley, every sip of ash drink was another step towards readiness for the arena. Fresh from another round of barley gruel, your attention now turns to the very place you lay your aching body each night. Barracks life, cramped quarters. You're not in a luxurious villa, you're in the ludus, and your living space is a stark reflection of your status as property, albeit highly valuable property. Imagine a perpetually dim, stuffy room, a constant symphony of snores, groans, and the shuffling of bodies in the night. This is your home, your prison, and sometimes your unlikely sanctuary. A mainstream historical fact you immediately register is that gladiators lived in communal barracks within the ludus complex, often in small cells or shared dormitories. These quarters were designed for efficiency and control, not comfort. You'd typically find a row of narrow wooden beds or straw mats lining the walls, providing minimal personal space. It's less like a modern dormitory and more like a very basic, very crowded military barracks optimized for housing large numbers of men. You quickly learn to appreciate even the smallest sliver of personal privacy, however fleeting. Now, for a quirky tidbit, despite the harsh conditions, these barracks sometimes became canvases for unexpected forms of expression. Graffiti carvings and even crude drawings might adorn the walls left by gladiators past and present. Imagine finding a rough sketch of a lion or a simple tally mark for a forgotten victory etched into the plaster beside your sleeping spot. These weren't grand works of art, but tiny defiant whispers of individuality in a life designed for uniformity. You might even find a crude drawing of a Dr. Quirky with donkey ears if you look carefully enough. Historians still argue whether these markings were purely for personal amusement or served as subtle acts of rebellion against their owners. Your cramped quarters mean virtually no personal space. You're constantly surrounded by the sounds and smells of dozens, perhaps hundreds of other men. The air, even on a cool night, can be heavy with the scent of unwashed bodies, stale sweat, and damp straw. You learn to sleep through the coughing, the restless turning, and the occasional nightmare-fueled cry of a fellow gladiator reliving a terrifying arena moment. It's an immersive, unavoidable sensory experience that grates on your nerves. Personal possessions are minimal. You likely have your basic clothing, perhaps a small wooden box for a few cherished items, a lucky charm, a letter from a loved one if you were once free, or a small carved token. Everything else belongs to the lanista. This lack of material possessions further reinforces your slave status, a constant reminder that your life is not your own. You learn to make do with very little, finding comfort in the intangible. The communal living also fosters a unique sense of camaraderie, which you'll explore more later. Despite the constant competition, there's a shared understanding, a silent bond forged by shared hardship and the omnipresent threat of death. You might find solace in whispered conversations after lights out, sharing fears, hopes, or just venting about the latest cruel punishment from a doctor. These small moments of human connection are vital for maintaining sanity in such an unforgiving environment. Discipline extends even to your downtime. There's no lounging about, even rest is structured. You're expected to maintain a semblance of order in your small space, despite the impossibility of true cleanliness. The doctors or their assistants conduct inspections, ensuring rules are followed, and any infractions are met with swift punishment. You remember that barley and bruises from before? Well, a messy bunk could earn you a few more bruises. Historians still argue about the precise size and layout of typical gladiatorial barracks. Were they single open rooms or divided into smaller cells? Archaeological evidence varies, suggesting regional differences or evolution over time. What remains consistent, however, is the emphasis on control and efficiency over comfort. You are not meant to be comfortable here. You are meant to be hardened, prepared. Ultimately, your Spartan living conditions are just another facet of the demanding gladiatorial life. The cramped quarters, the pervasive smells, the constant presence of others all serve to strip away your individuality, forcing you to confront the raw essentials of survival. Yet within these harsh confines, a peculiar form of community begins to emerge, a silent acknowledgement of shared fate that becomes its own kind of strength. It's a tough school, and the lessons learned in the barracks are as vital as those learned on the training ground. Stepping out of the cramped barracks, you now confront the bewildering paradox of your existence: social status, infamy, and fame. You are a gladiator, a warrior of the arena, and your position in Roman society is utterly unique, a perplexing blend of utter disdain and undeniable adoration. Imagine being both a rock star and a convicted felon, simultaneously worshipped for your skill and reviled for your very nature. It's a dizzying tightrope walk between the gutter and the heavens. A mainstream historical fact that defines your status is that gladiators were almost without exception slaves or social outcasts. infames. This meant they had severely restricted legal rights, were considered property, and were often viewed with contempt by the elite. Even if you were a free man who signed a contract to become a gladiator in Octoratus, you legally subjected yourself to the will of your lanista and accepted the social stigma. You'd feel the disdain from the Roman aristocracy, who might attend your fights, but would never consider you their equal no matter how many victories you earned. Now, for a quirky tidbit, despite their infamous status, gladiators were often seen as potent symbols of virility and raw masculinity, especially by Roman women. Graffiti found in Pompeii, for instance, praises gladiators as the delight of all girls and the net of young women. Imagine receiving fan mail, or rather passionate scrawlings on walls from adoring female fans, despite being considered beneath contempt by their husbands. It's like a pop star being adored by millions, but still having to clean out the stable. You might hear whispers about a gladiator's secret rendezvous, despite the severe social barriers. Historians still argue whether this admiration from women was genuine romantic attraction or a rebellious fascination with the forbidden and dangerous. Infamy of your profession stems from its association with death, violence, and servility. You are a tool of entertainment, a spectacle for the masses, and your life is ultimately disposable. Roman morality, while reveling in the games, officially condemned the shedding of blood and the base nature of such public displays. You feel the weight of this societal judgment, knowing that even your greatest triumphs can't erase your inherent social stain. Yet this very infamy creates your fame. When you step into the arena, you are no longer just a slave. You are a performer, a hero, or villain of the moment. Victories bring immense popularity with your name scrawled on walls, your image depicted on lamps and mosaics, and your presence becoming a topic of eager conversation across the city. You hear the roar of the crowd, a powerful, intoxicating sound that can make you forget for a fleeting moment your lowly origins. You are part of a brutal entertainment industry, and as such you become a commodity. Your lanista invests heavily in your training, feeding, and equipment, hoping for a return on that investment through your arena performances. Successful gladiators could command high prices for their appearance, and their owners grew wealthy from the spectacles. You are a brand, in essence, a marketable product of violence. This unparadoxical position means your life is a constant push and pull between extremes. One moment you might be basking in the adoration of thousands in the amphitheater. The next you're back in the grimy barracks cleaning your own equipment or enduring a beating from a Dr. Kineum. The glory is public, the degradation is private, but both are ever present. It's like having two separate lives, one of a public idol and another of a legal non-person. You might find yourself contemplating this strange duality. How do you reconcile the screams of hero from the crowd with the whispered contempt of the elite? How do you accept the fan mail when your life is owned by another? It's a complex mental dance, navigating a world that both celebrates and scorns your very existence. Historians still argue whether gladiators internalized this dual status, finding genuine pride in their profession despite its legal and social constraints, or if the fame was merely a temporary illusion that couldn't mask the underlying despair of their servitude. Did they believe their own hype, or was it just a performance? You can never truly know the answer, but the tension of that question hangs heavy in the air. Ultimately, your infamy and fame are two sides of the same gladiatorial coin. One defines your legal bondage, the other your public spectacle. Together, they create a life that is simultaneously enviable and horrifying, a testament to the unique, contradictory nature of Roman society and its enduring fascination with those who face death for entertainment. Stepping from the bewildering spotlight of the arena's fame and the dim reality of the barracks, your attention now shifts to a surprisingly advanced, yet sometimes gruesome aspect of your gladiatorial life: medical care, bones and bruise. You might imagine a few bandages and a quick prayer. The truth is, given the high value of a trained gladiator, your lanista had a vested interest in keeping you alive and fighting, leading to surprisingly sophisticated medical provisions within the ludus Your body is a valuable asset and it's treated as such, even if the treatments themselves are less than pleasant. A mainstream historical fact you'll quickly appreciate is that gladiatorial schools employed highly skilled medical personnel, often renowned physicians. Galen, one of the most famous physicians of the ancient world, actually began his career as a doctor at a gladiatorial school in Pergamon. This meant gladiators had access to some of the best medical care available in the Roman world, particularly in on-trauma surgery and wound management. You'd witness a surgeon meticulously stitching a deep gash or setting a broken limb with surprising precision knowledge gained from repeated exposure to severe injuries. Now, for a quirky tidbit, while skilled, their understanding of hygiene was rudimentary by modern standards. Treatments might involve applying poultices made from herbs, but also questionable substances. Imagine a doctor applying a mixture of cobwebs and vinegar to a wound or perhaps a concoction involving boiled goat dung. Yes, really, sometimes. It's like a bizarre blend of genuine medical insight and ancient folk remedies, often with a dash of, let's try anything. You might eye a particularly strange-smelling brew with suspicion, wondering if it's meant to heal you or poison you. This brew, medicus, is it for my leg or for a swift end? Historians still argue about the true efficacy of some of these more unusual remedies compared to their more rational treatments. Your days in the ludus are inevitably punctuated by bruises, sprains, and cuts from training. For these common ailments, you'd be seen by the medicus, who would clean and dress wounds, perhaps apply a splint to a sprained joint, and prescribe rest. Pain was a constant companion, but skilled care aimed to prevent infections, which were often fatal in the ancient world. You learn to grimace through the cleaning, knowing it's necessary for survival. After a bout in the arena, the level of care escalates dramatically. If you've survived a major injury, a deep sword cut a fractured bone from a fall, or a severe blow to the head, you are immediately whisked to the valetudinarium, the infirmary within the ludus. Here operations would be performed often without effective anesthetics beyond herbal remedies or perhaps a good slug of wine. You'd endure the sharp pain of needles and bone setting your mind clinging to the thought of recovery. The surgeons were adept at treating complex fractures, amputations, and severe lacerations. They used a variety of instruments, scalpels, bone drills, forceps, and even cauterization tools for staunching blood flow. You might hear the searing hiss of hot iron against flesh, a chilling sound that signals a desperate attempt to save a life. It's a brutal reality, but it means you stand a better chance of living than a common person with a similar injury. The rust, bones, and bruise. Approach to healing wasn't just about physical intervention. It often involved the prescribed diet you remember. Your specialized gladiatorial food was part of the recovery process, providing the necessary nutrients for tissue repair. You might be given specific herbal teas or potions designed to reduce inflammation or promote healing. This holistic view of recovery, combining diet, physical treatment, and sometimes the power of superstition, was crucial. Historians still argue about the quality of post-operative care and the recovery rates of gladiators after severe injuries. While they received advanced treatment for the time, did the Lannista's financial interests truly translate into empathetic long-term care for permanently maimed fighters, or were they simply cast aside if no longer profitable? You'd have to wonder about the fate of those who survived but could no longer fight. Ultimately, your access to surprisingly advanced medical care is a testament to your economic value. You are an investment, and the Lanista spares no expense in patching you up, getting you back into fighting shape. It's a brutal truth, but one that might just save your life, allowing you to live to fight or perhaps retire another day. The sight of the medicus is a mixture of fear and profound relief, for he holds your very future in his skilled, if sometimes strange, hands. Emerging from the infirmary, perhaps still a little sore from your last treatment, your attention now turns to a surprisingly meticulous and sometimes oddly satisfying aspect of gladiatorial life. Spa days, gladiator grooming. You might imagine rough, unkempt warriors smelling of sweat and blood. The truth, however, is that gladiators, like many Romans, cared deeply about personal hygiene and presentation even within the confines of the ludus. Your body, whether scarred or pristine, is still a vessel to be cared for, albeit in ways that might surprise you. A mainstream historical fact you'll quickly discover is that ancient Romans, regardless of social class, highly valued public baths. Gladiators were no exception. Access to bathhouses, either within the ludus or public ones, perhaps at specific, less crowded times, was crucial for hygiene and muscle relaxation after brutal training. You'd feel the comforting warmth of the tepidarium, warm room, the intense heat of the caldarium, hot room, and the invigorating chill of the frigidarium, cold plunge. It's a moment of sensory pleasure, a temporary escape from the grime of the training ground. Now, for a quirky tidbit, gladiators, like other athletes, would use a rastrillo, a curved metal tool, to scrape off sweat oil and dirt from their bodies after exercise or bathing. Imagine using a blunt curved metal scraper to literally peel off the day's grime. It sounds brutal, but it was a common and effective cleaning method, often preceded by applying olive oil to loosen dirt. You might see a fellow gladiator vigorously scraping himself down, leaving trails of gray grime on the floor. Nothing like a good scrape to feel truly clean, eh? You might hear someone quip. Historians still argue about the precise techniques used by gladiators to maximize the effectiveness of the strigil for muscle care. Your peculiar personal hygiene routine goes beyond mere washing. Before using the strigil, you might apply olive oil to your skin, not just as a cleanser, but also as a moisturizer and a way to condition muscles. This regimen was crucial for preventing skin infections from constant sweating and minor cuts, and for keeping your skin supple, minimizing painful chafing during combat. It's less about vanity and more about practicality, ensuring your most valuable asset, your body, remains in top condition. The act of bathing itself is a communal experience. You're surrounded by other gladiators, all engaged in the same ritual. This shared vulnerability fosters a surprising sense of camaraderie. You might engage in quiet conversation, discussing training, upcoming bouts, or just complaining about the doctores. It's a moment of shared humanity, stripped bare of armor and status, where everyone is simply a man seeking cleanliness and relief. Your hut's grooming habits also extend to your hair and beard. While some gladiators might maintain close-cropped hair for practicality, others might wear it longer, styled in specific ways that became part of their individual brand. Beards might be trimmed or shaved depending on current fashion or personal preference. You might even see barbers either dedicated to the ludus or visiting, attending to the gladiators, ensuring they look presentable, even if only for their fellow fighters. The ritual of going to the baths is more than just about cleanliness. It's about muscle relaxation and recovery. The heat, the steam, the vigorous scraping all contribute to easing the aches and pains from grueling training. You might feel your muscles loosen, the tension draining from your limbs, preparing your body for the next day's exertions. It's a crucial part of preventing injury and ensuring long-term physical durability. Historians still argue about the extent of private bath facilities within gladiatorial schools versus the use of public baths. Did the Lanistae provide luxurious private bathing for their most valuable gladiators? Or was it a more communal, utilitarian experience? For all evidence suggests a range depending on the wealth of the ludus owner. You realize that even in hygiene there were hierarchies. Ultimately, your gladiator grooming is a vital component of your professional life, blending practical necessity with cultural expectation. It's a stark reminder that even within the brutal world of the arena, there was a surprising attention to the body's maintenance and presentation. You emerge from the baths feeling refreshed, invigorated, and strangely ready for whatever challenges the ludus throws at you. Next, perhaps even smelling faintly of olive oil and something vaguely herbal. Refreshed, scraped, and oiled from your bath, your heart now begins to quicken as the shadow of the arena looms large. Dressing up, pre-bout rituals. This isn't just about putting on armor. It's a meticulously choreographed transformation, a blend of practical preparation, superstitious rite, and psychological hardening. You are no longer just a man. You are becoming a warrior, a spectacle, a potential legend. The very air seems to thrum with a nervous energy as the moment of truth approaches. A mainstream historical fact you immediately recognize is that gladiators wore highly specialized and often elaborate armor tailored to their specific fighting style. A warmer mellow, for example, would wear a large rectangular shield, scutum, a short sword, gladius, a distinctive helmet with a fish crest and greaves on one leg, a chi retirius, By contrast, might have minimal armor, a shoulder guard, Galeris an arm guard, Chernite Manica relying on a net and trident. You'd be guided by attendants, piece by agonizing piece into your fighting gear, each strap, and buckle a step closer to the inevitable clash. Now, for a quirky tidbit before the fight, gladiators would often participate in a hidden public procession called the Pampa, parading through the city streets or around the arena, showcasing their impressive physiques and dazzling armor. Imagine thousands of eyes upon you, some admiring, some curious, some even mocking as you march towards your potential doom. It's like a macabre fashion show where the models are also about to engage in a potentially lethal fight. You might catch a glimpse of the rich elite in their finery, perhaps, even waving a respectful hand. Look, dear, there's my favorite Thraex, so dashing even with that grim expression. Historians still argue whether this procession was primarily for public entertainment or a final psychological test for the gladiators themselves. Your ceremonial preparations. Begin with the donning of your subligacellum, a loincloth followed by thick padded linen or leather wraps on your legs and arms, providing crucial protection from chafing and minor blows. Then come the metal greaves arm guards, manichae, and the crucial helmet. Each piece feels heavy, cumbersome, yet offers a strange comfort, a promise of defense against the sharp realities of the arena. The sounds of metal clinking and leather creaking fill the air around you. The psychological readiness is paramount. As each piece of armor is fastened, you feel a shift within yourself. The fear is still there, a cold knot in your stomach, but it begins to be channeled, transformed into focus and adrenaline. You might repeat a personal mantra or a silent prayer to your chosen deity. You look at your fellow gladiators, seeing similar transformations in their eyes, a hardening, a resolve. You are no longer just a person. You are a gladiator, an instrument of combat. Your weapon is handed to you. The weight familiar, the grip firm. You might test its balance, feel the edge if it's a practice blade for the pampa, or later the sharpened one for the true fight. This is your partner in the dance of death, and you mentally prepare for its every movement. The air is tense, thick with anticipation, the collective nervous energy of dozens of men preparing for their ultimate test. You remember the dietary regimens and the grueling training? This is what it was all for. Every ache, every bruise, every meal of barley gruel was a step towards this moment. The very act of dressing up is a ritual of transformation, shedding your civilian self, if you ever had one, and embracing your identity as a fighter. It's a powerful, almost spiritual experience, preparing you for the brutality ahead. Historians still argue about the extent to which gladiators viewed these preparations as deeply spiritual rites versus purely practical steps for survival. Was it genuine piety, a contractual obligation, or a necessary mental exercise to steel themselves? You can never truly know their innermost thoughts, but the solemnity of the process suggests a profound meaning beyond mere spectacle. Finally, the moment arrives. Fully armored, weapon in hand, you stand ready. The gates to the arena loom ahead, massive and ominous. The roar of the crowd, once a distant hum, is now a deafening wave washing over you, pulling you forward. Our pre-bout rituals are complete. You are no longer just a recruit. You are a gladiator ready to step into the blazing sun, ready for whatever fate awaits you in the sand. The deafening roar of the crowd washes over you as you step into the blinding sunlight of the arena. Your senses are overwhelmed, the vastness of the amphitheater, the shimmering heat off the sand, the thousands of faces, a blur of anticipation and bloodlust. This is the arena's shadow after the fight. Is a world away, but in this moment it consumes everything. You are a solitary figure on a grand stage, and your performance will determine if you live to see another day. A mainstream historical fact that hits you immediately is the sheer scale and spectacle of Roman gladiatorial games. Ambitious emperors and wealthy patrons would spare no expense, often providing elaborate sets. Exotic animals, remember the Venetians, we might encounter later in hundreds of gladiators for a single day's entertainment. You feel the tangible weight of those expectations, knowing that you are just one player in a colossal, deadly drama. The air crackles with an almost palpable excitement, a mix of fear and exhilaration. Now, for a quirky tidbit, sometimes before the serious combat began, there would be mock naval battles, hanomachia, staged in specially flooded arenas or artificial lakes. Imagine the sheer logistical nightmare of filling a massive amphitheater with water for miniature warships. While rare and incredibly expensive, these spectacles were designed to impress and entertain on an epic scale, serving as a prelude to the real fighting. You might hear the distant splash of water being pumped into a lower level, wondering if today's fight will feature a surprise aquatic element. Just when I thought I had the hang of the sand, they bring out the boats. Historians still argue about the true frequency and scale of these namachiai after their initial popularity in the early empire. The wood fight itself is a blur of training instinct and adrenaline. You move parry thrust your muscles, responding automatically, every action honed by countless hours of drills against the palas. Remember those wooden posts? The weight of your armor, once cumbersome, now feels like a second skin. You block a blow, feel the jarring impact, and retaliate. The cheers and gasps of the crowd ebb and flow, sometimes for you, sometimes for your opponent. You learn to filter out the noise, focusing only on the man in front of you, his movements, his weaknesses. The mood shifts dramatically depending on the flow of combat. If you're gaining the upper hand, you hear shouts of encouragement, perhaps even the distinct cry of Hulk Habit. He's got it. If you falter, you might hear groans of disappointment or even a growing chorus of Mita. Let him go if your opponent has gained control. The crowd is a fickle god, its favor swinging wildly with each clash of steel. Your life and your opponent's hangs by a thread. When one gladiator is clearly defeated, either disarmed, badly wounded, or signaling submission by raising a finger, the decision rests with the editor, the organizer of the games, and ultimately the crowd. You remember the popular image of thumbs up or down. Historians still argue whether the thumb gesture was indeed up for mercy and down for death, or if it was the reverse or even a different gesture entirely. What is clear, however, is that the crowd's will conveyed through their shouts and gestures heavily influenced the final verdict. If you are the victor, a wave of relief washes over you, quickly followed by exhaustion. You might salute the editor, acknowledge the roaring crowd, perhaps even cast a look of grim satisfaction at your defeated opponent. You have survived. You have earned your life, at least for today. Prizes such as a laurel wreath, coins, or even a symbolic palm branch might be presented. If you are defeated, the world narrows to the face of your victorious opponent and the looming presence of the editor. You prepare for the coup de grace, a swift professional kill that spares you prolonged suffering if mercy is not granted. You recall that earlier thought about not surviving a day in the ludus. This is the moment that could come true. The journey back to the barracks after the fight is vastly different depending on the outcome. For the victor, it's a slow, limping procession, perhaps, with the cheers of a lingering crowd echoing in your ears. For the defeated, it's either carried out on a stretcher or worse, dragged through the gate of Libitina, the Roman goddess of funerals, a grim exit for the dead. You feel the sun on your skin, the hot sand underfoot, and the profound, almost overwhelming sensation of being alive. This is the raw, visceral reality of the arena's shadow, where every moment is a precious commodity. The blinding sunlight and deafening roar of the arena now fade, replaced by the cool, dimly lit confines of the infirmary. Whether victor or vanquished, if you're lucky enough to still draw breath, your immediate future is all about wounds and recovery, scarred but alive. You find yourself lying on a cot, every muscle screaming in protest, the scent of antiseptic herbs mingling with the stale odor of blood. This is where the grim, painful, and often prolonged process of healing truly begins. A mainstream historical fact you'll quickly come to appreciate is the specialized care given to gladiators in the valetudinarium. The medicus doctor, often a highly skilled surgeon like the aforementioned Galen and his assistants, would immediately assess your injuries. They understood that a gladiator was a valuable, albeit human investment, and extensive effort was put into patching you up. You might feel the gentle yet firm hands of the medicus probing a wound, his expression focused and serious. Now, for a quirky tidbit to staunch bleeding from severe cuts, ancient Roman doctors sometimes used cobwebs, often mixed with honey or vinegar, as a primitive but surprisingly effective dressing. Imagine seeing the medicus carefully pressing a sticky gray wad of spider silk onto your bleeding arm. It sounds disgusting, but cobwebs contain natural clotting agents, and honey has antiseptic properties. You might try to avert your gaze, but you endure it knowing it might be the difference between life and death. Just think of it as a natural, very hairy bandage. You might hear a wry comment. Historians still argue about the true effectiveness of this particular remedy versus other more conventional approaches like tight bandaging. Your wounds are a testament to the brutal reality of your profession. Deep sword cuts that sever muscle shield, blows that leave ribs bruised or cracked, falls that twist ankles. These are the common currency of the arena. Each injury is meticulously cleaned, often with vinegar or wine, a painful process that makes you clench your jaw. Then, depending on its severity, it might be stitched with linen thread, cauterized to prevent infection, or wrapped tightly with layers of clean bandages. This painful process of healing is slow and arduous. You're confined to your cot, your movement restricted. The gladiatorial diet, usually bland and energy-rich, is now focused on recovery, providing nutrients for tissue repair. You might be given specific herbal concoctions to dull the pain or promote sleep, though true relief is often elusive. Every shift, every movement sends a fresh wave of agony through your injured limb or torso. You learn the true meaning of patience, forced to endure the relentless throbbing and dull ache. The fear of infection is constant. Without modern antibiotics, even a minor cut could fester and become fatal. You watch as fellow gladiators succumb to fevers or gangrene, grim reminders of the precariousness of your recovery. This constant threat makes you follow the medicus's instructions with unwavering obedience, knowing your life depends on it. Your body begins to accumulate scars, each a unique map of your arena history, a jagged line across your arm from a gladius, a puckered mark on your leg from a trident, a deep indentation on your shoulder where a blow landed. These aren't just blemishes, they are badges of honor, proof of survival. You see them on the veteran gladiators, a silent testimony to their endured combat. You realize that your own body is becoming a living ledger of your past fights, permanently marking you as a warrior. Rehabilitation is an integral part of the process once the initial healing is done. You're put through gentle exercises to regain strength and flexibility slowly at first, then building intensity. The doctors oversee this, pushing you to regain your fighting form, eager to get their valuable asset back into the arena. It's a grueling physical therapy regimen designed to restore you to peak performance or as close to it as possible. Historians still argue whether gladiators who suffered truly debilitating injuries, rendering them unable to fight again, were simply executed or sold off for other forms of labor. While a lanista had invested in them, a permanently maimed gladiator was a liability. You might wonder about the fate of those who limped away scarred, but no longer useful, their fighting days truly behind them. But for now you are scarred but alive. And that is a victory in itself. The infirmary, though a place of pain, is also a place of hope, where your life so easily forfeit in the arena is painstakingly reclaimed. You endure knowing that each healed wound, each new scar, is a testament to your resilience, a silent promise to yourself that you fought, you bled, and you survived. Stepping out of the infirmary, perhaps still favoring a healing limb, your gaze now falls upon the men who shared your barracks, bled in the training yard, and might one day stand beside you or opposite you in the arena. Familial bonds, brothers in arms. You realize that in this harsh world where blood family is often distant or lost, the gladiatorial school forges a new intense kind of kinship. These aren't just fellow fighters, they are your surrogate family, bound by shared hardship and the omnipresent shadow of death. A mainstream historical fact that highlights this is the strong sense of sodalitas, comradeship that developed among gladiators. Despite their often diverse origins, from captured warriors to condemned criminals or even free volunteers, they shared a unique, perilous profession that fostered deep mutual reliance. You'd see them training together, eating together, and facing death together, creating an unbreakable bond. It's like an elite military unit forged in the crucible of constant threat where trust in your comrades is paramount. Now, for a quirky tidbit, gladiators would sometimes swear an oath known as the Sacramentum Gladiatorium, dedicating themselves to their lanista and to the discipline of the ludus. This oath often included a clause accepting that they might be burned, bound, beaten, and killed by the sword. Imagine signing up for a job that explicitly outlines your potential agonizing demise. This solemn vow taken together further cemented their shared identity and commitment, even in the face of brutal realities. You might hear a veteran gladiator wryly commenting, "Ah, the good old burning clause. Keeps us on our toes." Historians still argue whether this oath was taken literally by all gladiators, or if it served as a powerful rhetorical and psychological tool by the Lennistime. Your strong camaraderie begins to form almost immediately in the barracks and on the training ground. You help each other with armor-shared tips on technique and offer a sympathetic ear after a particularly harsh punishment from a doctor out of Kern. There's an unspoken understanding, a shared burden that binds you together. You know that the man next to you truly understands the fear before a fight, the pain of a wound, and the fleeting joy of a victory. These men become your surrogate families. Many gladiators were separated from their biological families through slavery or circumstance. In the ludus, they found a new, if unconventional, support system. Older, more experienced gladiators might take younger recruits under their wing, offering advice, protection, and a sense of belonging. It's like a dysfunctional, hyper-masculine brotherhood, where affection is often expressed through gruff words and shared suffering. You might engage in shared rituals before a fight, perhaps a quiet word of encouragement, a shared drink, or a quick prayer for mutual survival. Even in the arena, fighting against a former training partner, there might be a subtle acknowledgement, a silent respect for the shared journey that led them to that deadly dance. The bonds forged in the ludus could sometimes run deeper than those of blood, especially when facing death together. The shared living conditions, the common meals, the constant exposure to each other's triumphs and tragedies all contribute to this intense bond. You see each other at your weakest and strongest, stripped of pretense and forced to confront raw humanity. It's a level of intimacy rarely found in regular Roman society. Historians still argue about the extent to which these bonds of camaraderie might have led to reluctance to kill fellow gladiators in the arena, especially those from the same ludus. While the spectacle demanded blood, did some fights end with a quicker, less agonizing death out of a grim form of mercy between brothers in arms? You might imagine a defeated gladiator looking into the eyes of his former comrade, finding a flicker of shared understanding before the final blow. These Russ brothers in arms were also your most direct competition. The complex dynamic of relying on each other for survival and training, yet potentially facing each other in deadly combat, creates a constant tension. Yet the bonds often transcended this rivalry, transforming it into a respectful contest rather than pure hatred. They were bound not just by the chains of slavery, but by the deeper invisible bonds of shared fate and mutual respect earned in the crucible of the arena. Ultimately, your familial bonds within the ludus are a crucial element of survival. They provide emotional support, practical assistance, and a sense of belonging in a world designed to strip you of everything. These are the men who truly understand what it means to be a gladiator, and their shared struggles forge a connection that can endure even the horrors of the arena. From the gruff yet profound bonds of brotherhood within the ludus, your thoughts might occasionally drift to a more tender, often precarious form of human connection. Love and loss, forbidden romance. You might imagine gladiators as emotionless fighting machines, but they were still men with human desires and needs. In a world designed to strip you of personal attachments, any form of intimate connection became a precious, risky commodity, sometimes defying the very rules of society. A mainstream historical fact that underscores the precariousness of gladiator relationships is their washed slave status. As property, gladiators had no legal right to marry or to legitimize children. Any relationships they formed were informal, often tolerated by the lanista, if they didn't interfere with training or discipline, but always subject to their owner's whim. You'd see gladiators sharing quiet moments, perhaps a stolen glance, or a whispered word, knowing that their bond, however deep, lacked legal recognition and could be severed at any moment. Now, for a quirky tidbit, despite the rules, evidence from Pompeii suggests that gladiators often had fervent female admirers, including high-status Roman women. Graffiti found near the gladiatorial barracks includes declarations of love for specific gladiators such as Celadus the Thraex is the delight of all the girls. Imagine a wealthy Roman lady risking her reputation sending secret messages, or even visiting a gladiator in his sparse quarters. It's like a forbidden crush, but with lethal stakes and a very public stage. You might hear hushed rumors of such liaisons, a blend of scandal and romantic intrigue. Historians still argue whether these relationships were genuinely reciprocal or largely one-sided adoration from the fans. The complexities of gladiators' relationships extended beyond casual liaisons. Some gladiators might form lasting bonds with female slaves within the ludus, perhaps cooks, laundrywomen, or other household staff. These were relationships born of proximity, shared hardship, and mutual understanding, offering a sliver of normalcy in an otherwise brutal existence. You'd witness moments of quiet affection, perhaps a shared meal after hours, a simple gesture of comfort that spoke volumes in a world devoid of tenderness. The concept of forbidden romance wasn't just about social status. It also concerned the Lannista's control. Any deep emotional attachment could potentially interfere with a gladiator's focus, their willingness to fight to the death, or even lead to escape attempts. Therefore, such relationships, especially if they became too visible or demanding, could be swiftly, brutally curtailed by the owner, reminding you of your property status. You might see a fellow gladiator's beloved suddenly transferred or sold, a chilling reminder of the arbitrary power wielded by your lanista. Some gladiators, particularly those who were Uktarati free men who voluntarily joined, might have left wives or families behind before signing their contract. For them, the Maruana love and loss was a constant aching absence, perhaps fueled by the hope of one day earning enough to buy their freedom and return home. You might see a gladiator carefully unfolding a worn piece of papyrus with a crude drawing of children, a poignant reminder of a life far away. The fleeting nature of gladiatorial life, constantly shadowed by death, imbued these relationships with an intense poignancy. Every tender moment, every shared laugh was amplified by the knowledge that it could be their last. This heightened awareness of mortality made even the simplest gestures of affection deeply meaningful. Historians still argue whether the Lanistai actively encouraged or discouraged gladiator-slave relationships within the ludus. While they might disrupt discipline, children born to such unions would also become property of the Lanista, potentially increasing his future assets. Was it a calculated allowance or a constant battle against human nature? You'd have to weigh the practical benefits against the risks of emotional entanglement. Ultimately, despite the constraints of their brutal existence, gladiators were human, capable of forming deep connections. These forbidden romances, born in the shadows of the arena, were a testament to the enduring human need for intimacy and connection, even when surrounded by death and despair. They were fragile blooms in a harsh landscape, constantly threatened by the winds of fate and the arbitrary power of their owners, yet offering a brief, vital flicker of warmth in a cold, unforgiving world. Having glimpsed the tender, hidden world of gladiatorial romance, your perception of their status now broadens to the clamorous, often overwhelming adoration that followed them. Fan mail adoring masses. You imagine the gladiators only as grim figures facing death. The truth is, their exploits in the arena made them celebrities, sparking a widespread, almost frenzied public obsession that transcended social boundaries. Their fans weren't just onlookers. They were fervent devotees, and their expressions of admiration were as quirky as they were passionate. A mainstream historical fact you'll encounter is the intense popularity of gladiatorial games across all strata of Roman society. Successful gladiators became household names, their images appearing on everyday objects like lamps, pottery, and even children's toys. You'd hear their names shouted in the streets, debated in taverns, and whispered in elite households. It's like being a modern-day sports superstar, but with the added thrill of a potential gruesome death at every performance. The roar of the crowd was not just for the fight, it was for you, the performer. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the most direct evidence of this adoring public comes from the vast amount of graffiti found in places like Pompeii, where fans, particularly women, scrawled declarations of love, admiration, and even erotic fantasies about their favorite gladiators on walls. Imagine walking through the city streets and seeing messages like, "Floris the Thrax is truly the glory of all gladiator fans," or Crescens, "The net fighter is the doctor of young women's hearts." It was an ancient version of social media, direct and often explicit, showing a surprising level of public intimacy with these performers. You might even find a particularly smitten fan leaving a small offering like a flower or a ribbon near the ludus gates. Historians still argue whether this graffiti truly represented widespread romantic affection or was more akin to celebrity worship and rebellious expression. The adoring masses were a diverse crowd. While the elite attended for political reasons or as a display of status, the majority of spectators were ordinary citizens, shopkeepers, artisans, freedmen, and a significant number of women. You'd see them passionately cheering, booing, and even weeping, completely invested in the outcome of each bout. Their emotional engagement was total, a powerful connection to the performers who risked their lives for their entertainment. For the gladiators, this fan mail, whether scrawled on walls chanted in the arena or whispered through clandestine means, offered a peculiar form of validation. Despite their infamy status, remember their social standing, the roar of the crowd, the fervent support could be intoxicating. It was a stark contrast to the dehumanizing reality of their daily lives in the ludus. You might find a scrap of papyrus slipped under your barracks door, containing a poem praising your last victory, a small illicit treasure. This public adoration also had practical implications. Popular gladiators were more valuable to their lanista, commanding higher prices for their appearances and increasing the prestige of the ludus. Their fame could even contribute to their survival, as a crowd might be more inclined to spare a popular fighter with a thumbs up or whatever the actual gesture was. You learn that the crowd's favor is a shield as potent as any bronze helmet. The phenomenon of gladiator groupies was a known if scandalous aspect of Roman society. High-born women were particularly drawn to the forbidden allure of these dangerous, often muscular men, seeing in them a raw vitality missing from their own lives. You might hear whispers of a senator's wife developing a dangerous obsession or a wealthy widow showering her favorite gladiator with lavish gifts, much to the chagrin of polite society. Historians still argue about the true social consequences for Roman women who publicly adored or even pursued gladiators. Were they ostracized, or was it a tolerated, albeit scandalous, indulgence? You'd have to imagine it depended heavily on the individual's status and discretion. Ultimately, the adoring masses were a strange, powerful counterpoint to the gladiators' lowly status. Their fervent fan mail, expressed in countless ways, transformed these condemned men into cultural icons, giving them a fleeting, intoxicating taste of fame that few others in Roman society outside of emperors could ever achieve. You realize that even in the brutal arena, the human need for heroes, however flawed or tragic, found its ultimate expression. From the roar of the adoring masses, your thoughts now turn to a more tangible, if often elusive, aspect of gladiatorial life: finances, winnings, and debts. You might assume a gladiator's life offered no financial agency, merely a brutish existence of survival. The reality, however, was a complex web of potential earnings, compulsory expenses, and often a lifelong burden of debt that bound you tighter than any chain. Your body might be owned, but your potential to earn could dictate your fate. A mainstream historical fact you'll learn is that gladiators, particularly successful ones, could indeed earn money. These earnings weren't in the form of a regular salary, but rather a share of the prize money from victories or gifts from adoring fans or generous patrons. You'd feel a rare flicker of hope seeing a veteran gladiator clutching a small pouch of coins, knowing that each victory brought you closer to a small measure of independence, or at least a few extra comforts. It wasn't a king's ransom, but it was more than many slaves ever saw. Now, for a quirky tidbit, while gladiators could win prize money, a significant portion of their potential earnings was often withheld by the lanista to cover the substantial costs of their training, food, medical care. Remember those bones and bruise and expensive equipment? Imagine winning a hard-fought victory only to be told that most of your winnings are going straight back to your owner to pay off your account. It was a system designed to keep you perpetually indebted, a kind of ancient indentured servitude that rarely saw gladiators truly free of their financial obligations. You might hear a jaded veteran sigh, "Another victory, another step closer to more debt." Historians still argue whether the contracts for free octorati were truly fair or designed to exploit their desperation. Your potential earnings, varied wildly. A novice might receive little more than basic food and lodging. A highly celebrated famous gladiator, however, could command substantial sums for their appearances, enough to make their lanista quite wealthy. You'd witness the difference: the new recruits in worn gear, the veterans with gleaming custom-made armor bought by their owner with their own winnings. This financial hierarchy within the ludus reinforced the value placed on successful fighters. The compulsory expenses were a constant drain. The cost of your training, food, and medical attention, even though you were a valuable asset, you were also a business expense, was meticulously accounted for. Any new piece of equipment, a specialized helmet, or even better quality bandages would be tallied against your earnings. It was a debt that could accumulate rapidly, effectively chaining you to the ludus even without physical bonds. Beyond the formal accounting, gladiators might also spend their meager personal allowances on small luxuries. You might see someone sharing a flask of cheap wine or a small coin used to gamble on a game of dice. We'll get to their gambling habits later. These small indulgences offered fleeting moments of escape, a way to reclaim a tiny sliver of agency in a life largely without it. The concept of lifelong debts meant that even if a gladiator earned a significant sum, they rarely truly accumulated wealth. The debt to the lanista would be a continuous burden, sometimes even passed on to the gladiator's family if he died indebted. For many, the dream of freedom, the rudis, a wooden sword symbolizing discharge, which we'll discuss soon, was inextricably linked to clearing these financial obligations. It was a golden carrot perpetually just out of reach. Historians still argue whether the lanistae genuinely intended for gladiators to earn their freedom through payment, or if the financial system was primarily designed to ensure a constant supply of fighters by keeping them in perpetual servitude. Was it a path to liberty or a sophisticated form of economic bondage? You'd have to weigh the rare cases of gladiators buying their freedom against the vast majority who never did. Ultimately, the finances or tornesos of a gladiator's life were a stark illustration of their precarious existence. Winnings offered a tantalizing glimpse of independence, but the relentless accumulation of debts often meant that true freedom remained an elusive dream. You are left with the image of men fighting not just for their lives, but for their very solvency, hoping each clash in the arena might chip away at the invisible chains of their financial bondage. It's a cruel irony, fighting for freedom that costs more than blood. From the burdensome weight of financial debts, your eyes now turn to a far more precious, yet equally elusive form of liberation. Freedom's price, wooden sword. You've witnessed the brutality of training and the spectacle of the arena, knowing that for most gladiators, death was the only release. Yet a rare few dared to dream of a different end, one granted not by fate but by merit in the capricious will of the crowd. A mainstream historical fact you'll grasp is that a gladiator could, under specific circumstances, be granted their freedom, known as mundane or manumission. This was often signified by the awarding of a wooden sword called a rudis. This wasn't a universal right or a guarantee. It was a rare privilege typically bestowed upon highly successful and popular gladiators who had survived many bouts and perhaps given exceptional service. You'd feel a profound sense of awe watching a gladiator receive this symbolic sword, knowing it represented a rebirth, an escape from the bloody path you were all forced to walk. Now for a quirky tidbit, the rudis was literally a wooden sword, often a blunted practice weapon, but its significance far outweighed its simple material. It symbolized a gladiator's discharge from service, his freedom from the contract, and his right to no longer fight in the arena. Imagine receiving a simple piece of wood that represented your entire future, your liberation from a life of constant threat. It's like being handed a receipt for your soul. You might hear whispers among the younger gladiators, "If only I could get my rudis, then I could finally get some decent sleep." Historians still argue about whether gladiators who received the rudis sometimes chose to return to the arena as free agents, perhaps for a hefty fee, driven by a love of the fight or financial need. The Washishwand, a rare path to manumission, was typically earned through a combination of longevity skill and crowd appeal. A gladiator who consistently performed well, won many fights, and captivated the audience had a higher chance of being noticed by the editor, or even the emperor. You'd witness moments where the crowd, deeply impressed by a gladiator's bravery or skill, would roar for his release, often chanting, "Mite mite," release him, a more powerful demand than for mercy in combat. The decision for manumission ultimately lay with the lanista and the editor, the organizer of the games. While a crowd's passionate appeal could influence them, it wasn't an absolute guarantee. The lanista had invested heavily in the gladiator and might be reluctant to lose such a valuable asset unless a significant financial incentive was offered. This created a delicate balance between public pressure and private profit. When a gladiator was granted the rudisi, the ceremony was simple but deeply symbolic. You'd see the lanista or editor present the wooden sword perhaps with a formal declaration of freedom. The gladiator would then, for the first time in years, be able to step out of the arena, not through the gate of Libitina for the dead, but through the gate of life. You'd feel a surge of bittersweet hope seeing a familiar face walk through that gate, knowing they had escaped the fate that awaited so many others. The pool price of freedom wasn't just physical survival, it often involved the financial debt you remember. A gladiator might have to work for years sometimes, even as a trainer. Doctor within the ludus after receiving his rudis, to pay off his accumulated expenses before he was truly free to leave. So while the wooden sword symbolized liberation, the financial chains could remain. Historians still argue about the precise number of gladiators who actually achieved manumission. While famous examples exist, the vast majority likely died in the arena or succumbed to their injuries. Was it a genuine incentive or merely a very distant, almost mythical possibility for the average fighter? You'd have to conclude it was a rare prize hard won and dearly paid for in more ways than one. Ultimately, the hunter wooden sword was more than just a symbol. It was the tangible embodiment of a gladiator's dream. It represented an escape from servitude, a chance at a life beyond the sand and blood. You are left with the powerful image of a warrior scarred and weary clutching that simple piece of wood, knowing that it signifies not just the end of one life, but the fragile, precious beginning of another. It was the ultimate victory, a triumph over fate itself. Having witnessed the rare, profound moment of receiving the rudis, your mind now turns to the elusive, often quiet reality of retirement dreams post-arena life. You might imagine former gladiators living lavish lives of luxury, but the truth was far more varied, often humble, and always shaped by the indelible marks of their past. For those lucky enough to survive the arena's brutal embrace, a new chapter awaited one free from constant threat, yet never truly free from memory. A mainstream historical fact you'll learn is that gladiators who gained their freedom, rear rudiari, often pursued a number of different paths. Many became trainers, doctores, within the ludus where they once fought, lending their invaluable experience to new recruits. You'd see them older now, their bodies still powerfully built, but etched with countless scars, demonstrating techniques with a chilling efficiency born of direct experience. It's like a retired athlete becoming a coach, but with far higher stakes for their protégés. Now for a quirky tidbit, some retired gladiators, particularly those with significant fame and charisma, might become bodyguards for wealthy patrons or political figures. Imagine a grizzled veteran gladiator, still possessing an intimidating presence, now guarding a Roman senator through the bustling forum. It was a way to leverage their formidable combat skills and intimidating reputation outside the arena, often earning a respectable living. You might hear whispers in the street, "Don't mess with that man. He used to fight lions for breakfast." Historians still argue whether such positions were primarily for protection or largely for prestige and show. The metaverse often quiet lives of retired gladiators could also involve becoming stewards on estates, tavern owners, or even gladiatorial equipment makers. They might open a small business using the meager funds they managed to accumulate, or perhaps supported by a grateful former patron. The common thread was a desire for a life free from the constant threat of death, a yearning for stability and peace after years of chaos. You'd notice their physical changes, the deep scars, remember those bones and bruises that covered their bodies, a permanent testament to their past profession. Their movements might be stiffer, their joints aching from years of brutal training and combat. Yet there would also be an undeniable discipline in their posture, a quiet intensity in their eyes forever shaped by the arena. For some, retirement meant returning to their original homes if they were free men who had signed on as Uktarati. This was the ultimate dream for many, to reconnect with lost family, to live out their days in peace far from the roar of the crowd. You might imagine a former gladiator, now an aging farmer, tending his fields, the silence of the countryside, a profound contrast to the thunder of the amphitheater. However, post-arena life wasn't always idyllic. Many retired gladiators would have carried the psychological scars of their experiences. The trauma of witnessing death, the constant fear, the loss of comrades, these would linger long after the final bout. You might see a retired gladiator staring blankly into the distance, haunted by unspoken memories, or reacting sharply to a sudden loud noise. Historians still argue whether retired gladiators, particularly the famous ones, maintained a strong social network with their former comrades, or if the bonds of the ludus largely dissolved upon manumission. Did they gather at taverns, swapping old war stories and reminiscing about past glories? Or did they simply try to forget their past lives? You'd have to imagine a mix of both, depending on individual temperament. The relatively small number of gladiators who survived to retirement meant that their stories, though diverse, were also exceptionally rare. They were the outliers, the ones who defied the odds, their wooden swords a symbol of their incredible resilience. Their retirement dreams were hard-won, often modest, but deeply cherished, a testament to the human desire for a life lived on one's own terms. Ultimately, the post-arena life for a gladiator was a precious gift purchased with sweat, blood, and the constant gamble of life itself. You're left with a profound appreciation for the quiet courage of those who, having stared death in the face, repeatedly chose to build a new life, far from the cheering crowds, finding a different kind of peace in the twilight of their extraordinary careers. Their enduring memory, however, remained tied to the sand. From the quiet contemplation of retirement, your attention now shifts to the unseen forces that gladiators believed shaped their very destiny: superstitions, charms, and omens. You find yourself in the hushed, tense moments before a fight, where every gesture, every whispered word, every object held close carries profound significance. In a life constantly teetering on the edge of oblivion, a belief in luck and divine favor wasn't just comforting. It was a vital psychological shield against the brutal randomness of the arena. A mainstream historical fact you'll learn is that ancient Romans, including gladiators, were profoundly superstitious. They believed that the gods' spirits and various omens could influence outcomes. Gladiators facing life or death situations daily would naturally cling to any belief that offered a semblance of control or protection. You'd see them making small offerings, muttering prayers, or wearing specific amulets before training or combat, seeking an edge that skill alone couldn't provide. Now, for a quirky tidbit, gladiators sometimes wore amulets made from parts of wild animals. They had fought or defeated, believing these would transfer the animal's strength or courage to them. Imagine a gladiator with a small polished boar's tooth tied to his wrist, or a tiny piece of lion's mane sewn into his padding. It's like wearing a very primal good luck charm, a physical manifestation of conquered power. You might overhear a gladiator boasting, "This bear claw, it makes me invincible, just like the bear used to be." Historians still argue whether such practices were genuinely believed to be effective or merely served as psychological boost to confidence. Your belief in luck permeated every aspect of your gladiatorial existence. You'd pay attention to small omens, the flight of birds, the way your weapon felt in your hand, even the arrangement of dust on the training ground. A good omen might bring a surge of confidence, a bad one, a flicker of dread that you had to suppress. This constant vigilance for signs of fortune or misfortune added another layer of mental strain to an already demanding life. Souvenir charms were ubiquitous. You'd likely wear an amulet yourself, perhaps a small phallic charm for good luck and protection against evil, a surprisingly common ancient Roman symbol, or a specific deity symbol. These were not just ornaments. They were active magical objects consecrated and believed to deflect bad luck or channel positive energy. You might see gladiators secretly touching their charms before stepping into the arena, a silent plea for divine intervention. The Romans also could range from the mundane to the dramatic. Tripping on the way to the arena or an unexpected gust of wind might be interpreted as a bad sign. Conversely, a perfect sunrise or an unexpected victory in a training spar might be seen as a blessing. The doctors themselves, though pragmatic, would likely tolerate or even encourage these superstitions, knowing that confidence, however derived, was crucial for performance. Rituals were also key. Before a major bout, gladiators might offer sacrifices to specific gods like Mars, god of war, or Hercules, patron of athletes. You'd participate in these ceremonies watching as incense was burned and prayers were recited, hoping to curry favor with the powerful deities who oversaw life and death. It was a communal act of seeking divine protection, binding you together with your comrades in a shared quest for survival. Historians still argue whether the Lanistai and Editori actively exploited gladiators' superstitions to control them, using false omens or rigged rituals to manipulate their morale. Was it a genuine shared belief system or a tool of psychological warfare? You'd have to imagine a shrewd lanista knowing exactly how to play on fears and hopes to get the best performance from his fighters. Ultimately, the gladiator's belief in superstition charms and omens was a powerful coping mechanism in a world where life was cheap and death was omnipresent. It provided a sense of agency, a flicker of hope that forces beyond their control could be influenced. You are left with the image of men physically formidable, yet spiritually vulnerable, seeking solace and an edge in the unseen realms, hoping that a tiny charm could deflect the sharpest blade or a whispered prayer could bend the hand of fate. From the quiet world of charms and omens, your attention now swivels to a more boisterous, often riotous aspect of gladiatorial leisure, gambling habits, dice, and debauchery. You might picture gladiators as stoic figures focused solely on combat. The truth, however, is that off-duty many indulged in the very human pleasures of chance and revelry, seeking escape from the omnipresent shadow of the arena, even if it meant risking their meager earnings or falling deeper into debt. A mainstream historical fact you'll learn is that gambling was incredibly popular across all social classes in ancient Rome, despite being illegal at various times. Gladiators, with their fluctuating incomes and high-stakes lives, were naturally drawn to games of chance. You'd see them gathered in dimly lit corners of the barracks or in smoky back rooms of taverns hunched over rudimentary game boards or shaking dice cups, their faces a mix of hopeful anticipation and grim determination. Now, for a quirky tidbit, one of the most common gambling games was tali, played with knuckle bones, astragali, often from sheep or goats, which function much like modern dice. Imagine a group of hardened gladiators, their bodies scarred from the arena, intently rolling animal bones, betting their precious few coins on the outcome. It's a strangely mundane pastime for men whose lives were so extraordinary, a reminder of their very human desire for distraction and fortune. You might hear a gladiator curse loudly after a bad roll, momentarily forgetting the dangers of the arena in the thrill of the game. Historians still argue whether the Lanastai actively suppressed gambling or tolerated it as a pressure release valve. Your off-duty vices, often centered around these games of chance. After a grueling day of training, or perhaps after a successful and surviving bout, gladiators might use their small allowance or winnings, remember those to gamble. The stakes could vary: a few denarii, a share of future prize money, or even personal favors. The thrill of the win, however small, offered a fleeting sense of control in a life where so much was beyond your command. The atmosphere in these impromptu gambling dens was often thick with tension, camaraderie, and occasional bursts of anger. You'd hear the clatter of dice, the murmur of bets being placed, the sudden exclamations of joy or despair. The air might be heavy with the scent of cheap wine and unwashed bodies, adding to the raw, visceral nature of the scene. Beyond dice, gladiators might also engage in other forms of debauchery, though access to such pleasures would be highly controlled by the lanista. Visits to taverns outside the ludus might be rare and supervised, but within the barracks, illicit games and small smuggled amounts of wine could provide a momentary escape. These were small acts of defiance, tiny rebellions against the strict discipline of their lives. The dangers of gambling for a gladiator were significant. Losing could plunge them deeper into debt, potentially making their path to freedom even more elusive. It could also lead to altercations or disciplinary action from the doctors if discovered. Yet the allure of a quick fortune or simply the thrill of the game often outweighed the risks. Historians still argue about the psychological role of gambling in gladiatorial life. Was it merely a way to pass time or a desperate attempt to assert control over their fate in a world of high uncertainty? You could imagine gladiators feeling that since their lives were a constant gamble, they might as well try to influence the odds even in a small way. You might observe a veteran gladiator, his face etched with past struggles, playing a game with intense focus, perhaps more for the strategic challenge than the monetary gain. Or a young recruit desperate for a lucky break, betting his last few coins on a roll of the dice, hoping for a miracle that would somehow change his fortunes. Ultimately, the gambling habits of gladiators reveal a deeply human side to these professional killers. Despite their brutal training and perilous lives, they sought out moments of diversion risk and the fleeting hope of a lucky break. Their dice and debauchery were not just vices. They were a testament to the enduring human spirit seeking thrill and solace, even in the shadow of the arena, a small, reckless gamble against a fate that was largely predetermined. From the smoky dens of dice and debauchery, your journey now flows into another common and perhaps more pervasive form of gladiatorial escape: drinking culture, wine and revelry. You imagine these hardened warriors as disciplined machines, but off-duty many sought solace and camaraderie in the Roman tavern, letting down their guard if only for a few precious hours. It was a vital release, a liquid respite from the omnipresent specter of the arena. A mainstream historical fact you'll grasp is that wine was the ubiquitous drink of ancient Rome, consumed daily by all social classes, albeit in varying qualities. Gladiators, despite their strict regimens, were no exception. You'd see them after training or about gathered around rough wooden tables in a Capona tavern, their faces flushed, their voices growing louder with each emptied cup. It wasn't about getting subtly tipsy. It was often about getting truly drunk, drowning the day's fears in cheap watered-down wine. Now for a quirky tidbit, while some taverns were reputable establishments, many were notorious for being rowdy, low-class dives, often frequented by prostitutes and petty criminals. Imagine a famous gladiator adored by the masses, spending his off-duty hours in a smoky, ill-reputed pub, rubbing shoulders with the city's underbelly. It highlights the stark contrast between their public fame and their private indulgences, a place where their social infamia, remember, that was truly on display. You might hear a particularly drunken gladiator boasting loudly about his arena prowess, much to the amusement or annoyance of the locals. Another round for the victor barkeep, and make it strong, my liver has seen worse than this. Historians still argue whether such public appearances by gladiators were generally tolerated, or if l'honesty strictly controlled their access to such establishments. Your leisure time. In these Roman taverns was a precious commodity. It was a chance to escape the confines of the ludus, to momentarily forget the strict discipline and the constant threat of death. You'd share stories, boast about past victories, commiserate over injuries, and perhaps even lament a recent defeat. The rough banter and shared laughter provided a release valve for the immense psychological pressure you endured. The right wine and revelry wasn't always refined. Cheap wine, often diluted with water and sometimes flavored with herbs, or even pitch, was consumed in vast quantities. You might see gladiators engaging in boisterous singing, arm wrestling, or even minor brawls fueled by the alcohol and the simmering aggression from their profession. It was a raw, uninhibited release, a primal expression of their humanity in a world that often sought to deny it. While it offered escape, excessive drinking could also lead to disciplinary issues from the lanista or doctores. You remember the strict control they maintained over every aspect of your life. Getting too drunk or getting into trouble outside the ludus could result in severe punishment, reminding you that even your moments of freedom were ultimately constrained. There was always a price to pay for too much revelry. The camaraderie fostered in the barracks, your brothers in arms, often extended to these drinking sessions. You'd find solidarity in shared cups, a deepening of bonds that transcended the daily competition of the training ground. It was a way to reinforce your surrogate family, to find comfort in shared experiences and shared vices. Historians still argue about the extent to which alcoholism or chronic drinking affected gladiators' performance or longevity. While wine was part of daily life, did excessive consumption become a significant problem within the ludus, impacting their physical conditioning and readiness for the arena? You'd have to imagine that a lanista would discourage anything that might jeopardize his valuable investment. Ultimately, the drinking culture provided a crucial, if sometimes dangerous, outlet for gladiators. Their wine and revelry were not just about getting drunk. They were about reclaiming a piece of their humanity, finding fleeting moments of joy and oblivion in the face of relentless brutality. You are left with the image of scarred warriors raising their cups in a toast to survival, to comradeship, and to the fleeting, intoxicating escape offered by the Roman tavern. It was a temporary reprieve, a liquid shield against the harsh realities of their daily existence. Leaving the smoky haze of the Roman tavern, your journey now returns to the fundamental, inescapable truth that underpins every aspect of gladiatorial existence. Slave status chains and contracts. You might be famous, adorned with fan mail, or even dream of a wooden sword, but at your core, you are property. This legal reality shapes your every waking moment, from the clothes on your back to the food you eat and the very air you breathe. It's a truth that binds you more tightly than any physical restraint. A mainstream historical fact you'll never forget is that the vast majority of gladiators were indeed slaves. They were either born into slavery, captured in war, or condemned to the arena as a form of punishment. As such, they had virtually no legal rights. Their bodies, their labor, and their lives belonged entirely to their lanista or owner. You'd feel the weight of this legal non-existence, knowing that even your most glorious victory in the arena couldn't change the fact that you were, in the eyes of Roman law, a chattel. Now, for a quirky tidbit, while most gladiators were slaves, some free men, remember the octorati, voluntarily sold themselves into gladiatorial servitude, signing contracts that legally bound them to the ludus for a set period or number of fights. Imagine signing away your freedom, essentially becoming a temporary slave for financial gain or a desperate attempt to escape debt. It's like a very extreme, very deadly temporary employment contract. You might see a fellow gladiator, once a free man, lamenting his choice, muttering, "This contract has more chains than an actual chain." Historians still argue about the true motivations of these octorati. Was it pure economic desperation, a thrill-seeking impulse, or even a form of social rebellion? You're a fundamental legal status, as property dictates everything. You cannot own property, marry legally, or testify in court against your owner. Your life is an investment for the lanistos to be managed and exploited for profit. You are fed, housed, and trained because you are valuable, not because you are human. This cold, hard reality is a constant companion, a stark contrast to the fleeting adoration of the crowds. The short chains and contracts symbolize this bondage. While literal chains might be used for punishment or transportation, the metaphorical chains of your legal status are far more pervasive. The contract, whether a formal document for an octoratus or the inherent condition of a slave, defines your existence. It dictates your training, your diet, your medical care. Remember those bones and bruise, and ultimately your appearance in the arena. You are subject to the absolute authority of your lanista. He can beat you, sell you, or even execute you without legal repercussion if he deems it necessary. This arbitrary power creates an environment of constant fear, even for successful gladiators. You learn to be constantly vigilant, to anticipate his moods, and to obey without question. Even the most celebrated gladiator, a hero to the masses, remains legally subservient. This inherent contradiction highlights the brutal efficiency of the Roman system, which could extract maximum entertainment and profit from individuals while simultaneously denying them basic human dignity. You are a public spectacle, but a private nonentity. Historians still argue whether the daily lives of gladiators, particularly the highly valued ones, were truly more comfortable than other forms of slavery in Roman society. While they received specialized food and medical care, their profession carried the constant, overwhelming threat of death, unlike most other slaves. Was it a good slavery or merely a specialized form of ultimate degradation? You'd have to weigh the brief moments of fame against the relentless grind and impending doom. The dream of the wooden sword, your path to freedom, is for many a distant, almost mythical aspiration, constantly hampered by the reality of debt, those winnings and debts, and the lanista's financial interest. It's a tantalizing hope dangled before you, but rarely fully realized. Ultimately, your slave status is the inescapable foundation of your gladiatorial life. No matter how brightly your star shines in the arena, no matter how loud the crowd roars for you, you remain property bound by the invisible chains and contracts that define your very existence. It's a sobering truth that cuts deeper than any blade, reminding you that true freedom is a prize far more valuable than any victory. The grim reality of your slave status still hangs heavy in the air as your journey within the ludus now turns to an inevitable, often painful truth. Discipline and punishment, flogging and fines. You might dream of glory in the arena, but your daily existence is governed by an iron fist where infractions, however minor, are met with swift, often brutal consequences. This isn't just about obedience. It's about breaking your will, forging you into a weapon that responds without question, even if it means enduring agonizing pain. A mainstream historical fact you'll quickly learn is that discipline in gladiatorial schools was extremely harsh, reflecting their military-like structure and the absolute power of the lanista and doctors. Physical punishment, including flogging, was a common method of enforcing obedience and correcting mistakes. You'd see a fellow gladiator, perhaps for a clumsy movement in training or a minor act of defiance, being tied to a post and whip the sickening crack of the lash echoing through the barracks. It was a constant visceral reminder of who held the power and the severe price of disobedience. Now, for a quirky tidbit beyond physical punishments, gladiators could also face fines or deductions from their potential winnings. Remember those winnings and debts for infractions. Imagine being told that your meager share of a future prize fight has been docked because you were late for morning drills. It's like being punished twice, once with physical pain, and again by losing the very thing that offered a glimmer of hope for freedom. You might hear a gladiator grumbling, "First the whip now, no extra barley for a week. The gods truly mock me." Historians still argue whether such fines were genuinely effective deterrents or simply another way for Lanistai to maintain financial control. The most strict disciplinary measures were designed to ensure absolute control over the gladiators. Every aspect of your life, from your training to your sleep, was regimented. Lateness, insubordination, laziness, or any failure to perform to expected standards could result in punishment. You learn to anticipate the mood of the doctors, to move quickly, and to keep your eyes down, avoiding anything that might draw unwanted attention. The doctors themselves, often former gladiators, remember their retirement dreams were uniquely positioned to enforce this discipline. They understood the physical and mental limits of the men in their punishments, while brutal, were typically designed to instill obedience and improve performance, not simply to maim. However, the line between discipline and abuse could often be blurred depending on the temperament of the individual trainer. Punishments could range from public humiliation, such as being forced to wear a humiliating placard, to severe physical beatings. Flogging, typically with whips or rods, was used to inflict pain and instill fear, a brutal lesson in obedience. You'd feel the burning sting, the humiliation, and the helplessness, realizing that even your hardened body was vulnerable to the lash. The fear of punishment created a pervasive atmosphere of tension within the ludus. You might see gladiators nervously glancing over their shoulders or subtly correcting a comrade's posture, simply to avoid incurring the wrath of a supervisor. It was a constant psychological pressure keeping everyone on edge. Historians still argue whether the severity of these punishments was primarily about maintaining order or also about desensitizing gladiators to pain and fear, thereby making them more effective killers in the arena. Was it about control or about conditioning them for extreme brutality? You'd have to consider that in a profession where life was cheap, physical pain was merely another tool. Ultimately, discipline and punishment were integral to the functioning of the gladiatorial school. They were the constant reminders of your slave status, the chains that bound you even when unseen. You are left with the chilling image of men already facing death in the arena, enduring daily floggings and fines, their bodies and spirits continuously broken and remade to serve the brutal demands of Roman entertainment. It's a testament to the sheer resilience required to survive not just the arena, but the very system that created you. Emerging from the harsh reality of discipline, Your journey now guides you to a more profound, albeit equally ritualistic aspect of gladiatorial life. Religious rites, gods, and sacrifice. You might imagine hardened warriors as purely pragmatic, but in a world where life was short and death was ever present, gladiators, like all Romans, clung to their deities, seeking favor, protection, and a measure of solace. Their piety was often personal, fervent, and deeply entwined with their perilous profession. A mainstream historical fact you'll learn is that gladiators, despite their infamous status, actively participated in religious practices and cults. They would offer prayers and sacrifices to various Roman and sometimes even foreign gods, particularly those associated with warfare strength or fate. You'd see them making small personal devotions in quiet corners of the ludus or participating in more formal ceremonies led by priests. It was a vital way to cope with the immense uncertainty of their lives, seeking divine intervention to tip the scales of fate in their favor. Now, for a quirky tidbit, gladiators often develop particular devotion to Hercules, seen as a paragon of strength, endurance, and overcoming impossible challenges, making him a highly relatable patron deity. Imagine a gladiator battered and bruised from training, looking up at a rough carving of Hercules with his club muttering a prayer for strength. It's like having a patron saint who truly understands what it feels like to constantly wrestle with impossible odds. You might hear a veteran gladiator attributing a narrow escape in the arena to Hercules' favor. Just when that Murmillo thought he had me, Hercules gave me the strength to parry. True story? Historians still argue whether this widespread devotion to Hercules was encouraged by the Lanistaeum to foster a fighting spirit or genuinely arose from the gladiators' personal beliefs. Your devotion to specific deities was a deeply personal affair. While formal Roman gods were acknowledged, you might also adhere to cults from your place of origin if you were a foreigner, or even local deities of the specific city your ludus was in. These beliefs offered a sense of continuity, a connection to a world beyond the confines of the arena. You'd carry small amulets, remember those charms and omens, consecrated to your chosen god, hidden beneath your clothing, hoping for their watchful eye in combat. Pre-fight rituals were paramount. Before stepping into the arena, you might participate in a formal sacrifice, usually an animal offering overseen by priests. You'd witness the solemn cutting of the animal's throat, the burning of its entrails, and the sprinkling of wine, all performed to appease the gods and ensure a favorable outcome. This wasn't just a formality. It was a desperate plea for survival, a moment of profound spiritual vulnerability. You'd feel the tension, the collective hope hanging in the air. The gods were seen as arbitrary, powerful forces. A victory might be attributed to divine favor, a defeat to a god's displeasure or a missed ritual. This worldview provided a framework for understanding their volatile existence. You learned to accept both triumph and tragedy as part of the divine will, even as you strive to influence it through piety. Some gladiators might also make vows, vota, to a god, promising a sacrifice or a dedication if they survived a particularly dangerous fight. This was a bargain with the divine, a desperate attempt to tip the scales in their favor when all else failed. You might hear a gladiator moments before entering the arena, whispering a fervent promise to Mars, hoping his life would be spared. Historians still argue about the extent to which gladiators maintained a coherent personal theology versus a more pragmatic, superstitious approach to their beliefs. Were they truly devout or merely hedging their bets in a life of constant peril? You'd have to imagine that for many the line was blurred, with faith and superstition coexisting as vital tools for survival. Ultimately, the religious rites, gods, and sacrifice were an integral part of gladiatorial life, offering a powerful blend of solace, hope, and psychological preparation. You are left with the image of hardened warriors kneeling in quiet prayer or participating in solemn sacrifices, seeking the favor of the divine in a world where mortal strength alone was often not enough to guarantee survival. Their faith, however varied, was a shield as crucial as any metal greave. Leaving the solemnity of religious rites, your journey now moves beyond the familiar walls of the ludus and into the wider Roman world. Traveling shows on the road. You might assume gladiators were confined to one arena. The truth is, many ludus owners operated like ancient talent agencies, sending their fighters on tours to different cities, spreading the spectacle and their own reputations. Imagine life as a constantly moving troupe of deadly performers, adapting to new arenas and new crowds, always under the watchful eye of your lanista mono. A mainstream historical fact you'll quickly learn is that gladiatorial games were held in amphitheaters across the entire Roman Empire, not just in Rome itself. Lanistae would indeed travel with their gladiators, especially the popular ones to meet demand in various towns and cities. You'd find yourself on dusty Roman roads, perhaps marching under guard with your fellow gladiators, or packed onto a boat if the journey involved crossing the sea. It was a tedious, often uncomfortable existence between bouts of stark contrast to the brief, exhilarating moments of glory in the arena. Now, for a quirky tidbit to announce their arrival, and the upcoming games, traveling gladiatorial troops would often send out heralds and produce painted advertisements, libelli e, depicting the gladiators, their fighting styles, and their past victories. Imagine arriving in a new town and seeing your own face, perhaps idealized and fearsome, plastered on a wall for all to see. It's like an ancient promotional poster, drumming up excitement for the deadly show. You might hear the local townspeople murmuring, pointing at your image, generating a mixture of pride and a renewed sense of performance pressure. Ah, so that's the famous gladiator who defeated the Lion of Antioch. Historians still argue whether gladiators had any input into these advertisements or if they were entirely a tool of the lanista. Your experience of life as a gladiator touring different Roman cities would involve constant adjustment. Each arena might have subtle differences in its sand, the arena, the layout of its gates, or the temperament of its local crowd. You'd quickly learn to adapt to read the specific energy of each new venue. The journey itself could be arduous, involving long marches, exposure to the elements, and rudimentary overnight stops far from the relatively stable environment of your home. Chordos armies. Security would be paramount during these travels. You are a valuable commodity, remember your slave status, and your lanista would employ guards to prevent escapes or attacks from rival troops or opportunistic bandits. You might feel the constant presence of armed men, a reminder that even off-duty you were never truly free. The anticipation of a new crowd, a fresh set of eyes, could be invigorating. You'd encounter different local traditions, perhaps even a new set of superstitions or gods to appease, remember those. The chance to impress a new audience, to earn new fan mail, those adoring masses offered a renewed sense of purpose. It was a chance to expand your fame even as it increased your exposure to danger. Sometimes these traveling shows might even involve demonstration bouts or parades through the town before the main event, further hyping the spectacle and allowing the local populace to get a closer look at the fearsome fighters. You'd march through crowded streets hearing the shouts and cheers, a public display of power and entertainment before the real blood began to flow. Historians still argue about the typical length of these gladiatorial tours and how far afield they might go. Did gladiators regularly cross vast distances, or were tours usually confined to specific regions? You'd have to imagine that logistics and the desire to maximize appearances would lead to efficient, if grueling, itineraries. Ultimately, traveling shows added another layer of complexity and danger to the gladiatorial life. It was a nomadic existence punctuated by moments of intense public performance, forcing you to adapt to new environments and constantly prove your worth. You are left with the image of men forever on the move, their lives a perpetual journey towards the next roar of the crowd, the next clash of steel under the watchful eyes of ever-changing skies. It was a relentless pursuit of spectacle, both for them and for the vast Roman Empire. From the dusty roads of traveling shows, your journey now shifts to a different, wilder spectacle that sometimes shared the arena with gladiators. Beast hunts, wild spectacle. You might think gladiators only fought other men. The truth is, many specialized fighters and sometimes even regular gladiators were thrown into combat with ferocious animals, transforming the arena into a brutal wild menagerie. Imagine facing down a snarling lion or a charging bear, your human skill pitted against primal instinct, all for the entertainment of a roaring crowd. A mainstream historical fact you'll learn is that venations, or wild beast hunts, were a hugely popular form of entertainment in ancient Rome, often preceding the gladiatorial contests. These spectacles involved exotic animals from across the empire, lions, tigers, bears, leopards, bulls, and even elephants pitted against professional venatores, beast hunters or occasionally condemned criminals, and even gladiators. You'd feel the raw, untamed fear as a gate opened, releasing a snarling beast into the arena, its roar echoing off the tiers of the amphitheater. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the animals for these hunts were often transported vast distances, captured at immense cost and effort. Imagine the logistical nightmare of bringing lions from Africa or bears from Gaul all the way to Rome, keeping them alive and contained until the day of the show. It was a massive, specialized industry fueled by the insatiable Roman demand for exotic spectacle. You might overhear a lanista complaining about the rising cost of feed for his new shipment of panthers. These beasts eat more than my best murmillo, and they're not even fighting each other yet. Historians still argue about the true ecological impact of these hunts on animal populations in their native habitats. Your hunt involvement in Venationes might take several forms. You might be a venator yourself, specifically trained in hunting techniques, equipped with spears, nets, or bows, facing the animals with a mix of skill and bravery. Or as a gladiator, you might be pitted against an animal as a form of punishment, a particularly dangerous test, or simply to add variety to the day's bloody entertainment. The weapons and armor for venatores were generally lighter, allowing for greater agility, crucial for surviving against swift and powerful beasts. The mood of a venatio was different from a gladiator fight. While human combat focused on skill and a potential for mercy, the beast hunts were about overwhelming power spectacle and the inherent danger of wild nature. You'd hear the collective gasp of the crowd as a lion roared, or the frantic cheers as a hunter dodged a charging bull. The sheer unpredictability of the animals added an element of thrilling chaos. The interactions with wild animals were incredibly perilous. A single claw swipe or a well-aimed charge could be instantly fatal. You learned to read the animal's movements, to anticipate its attacks, relying on instinct and the specialized training you received. It's a brutal dance of survival where your life depends on being quicker, smarter, or luckier than your opponent. Some animals might be chained or hobbled to make the fight fairer, for the human at least, but many were unleashed without restraint, leading to truly terrifying encounters. You might see a desperate venator scrambling for safety, or a gladiator using the very architecture of the arena to gain an advantage against a relentless predator. Historians still argue about the ethical implications of these hunts from a Roman perspective. While considered entertainment, was there any unease about the mass slaughter of wild animals, or was it simply accepted as a demonstration of Roman dominion over nature? You'd have to imagine that for the animals themselves, ethical considerations were entirely irrelevant. Ultimately, beast hunts were a stark reminder of the ancient world's fascination with nature's raw power and humanity's desire to conquer it. For the gladiators and venatores involved, it was another perilous facet of their lives, as entertainers pushing them to face death, not just from human hands but from the terrifying untamed forces of the wild. You are left with the chilling image of men grappling with beasts, their roars echoing across the sands, a testament to the brutal, spectacular demands of the Roman arena. From the brutal savagery of beast hunts, your journey now plunges into an even more extraordinary watery spectacle that sometimes graced the Roman arenas. Naval battles flooded arenas. You might think the roar of the crowd was solely for gladiators and lions. The truth is, on rare extravagant occasions, emperors would transform the very ground beneath your feet into a vast artificial lake, staging full-scale sea battles with hundreds of combatants. Imagine the mind-boggling logistics, the sheer expense, and the chilling beauty of warships clashing, where moments before gladiators had shed blood on dry sand. A mainstream historical fact you'll quickly grasp is that Nomasiae intonere simulated naval battles were indeed staged in ancient Rome, most famously in specially excavated basins, or incredibly in temporarily flooded amphitheaters, like the Colosseum. These were not mere reenactments. They involved real ships, often manned by hundreds of condemned criminals or prisoners of war fighting to the death. You'd feel the damp air, the spray of water, and the eerie quiet before the chaos erupted, a sensation utterly unlike any other arena experience. Now, for a quirky tidbit to create these vast temporary lakes, Roman engineers would develop intricate systems of aqueducts and drains flooding and draining the arena floor with astonishing speed. Imagine miles of pipes and tunnels working silently beneath the cheering crowds, turning a dry space into a functional naval battleground in a matter of hours. It's like an ancient, unbelievably complex plumbing system, all for the sake of one spectacular, watery show. You might hear a veteran gladiator muttering, "First barley, then lions, now boats. What's next, flying gladiators?" Historians still argue about the precise duration it took to flood and drain the Colosseum for such events. Your not unique demands as a combatant in a naumachia were immense. You might be a condemned prisoner forced into this watery death trap, or perhaps a specialized marine fighter. The skills required were different from land combat. You needed to know how to fight on a pitching deck, how to board an enemy ship, and how to swim often while wearing armor. The chaos of a naval battle, the splintering wood, the cries of drowning men, the tang of salt and blood, was a unique horror distinct from the dust and roar of gladiatorial combat. These horror spectacular naumachia were incredibly expensive and logistically challenging, often commissioned only by emperors to celebrate major victories or to impress the populace with their boundless wealth and ingenuity. You'd witness the sheer scale of the operation, dozens of ships, hundreds of combatants, all staged for a single unforgettable performance. The visual impact was unparalleled, a fleeting masterpiece of orchestrated destruction. The mood of the crowd during a naumachia was one of stunned awe and exhilaration. They weren't just watching a fight, they were witnessing a historical reenactment, a miniature war unfolding before their eyes. The sounds of oars churning, the shouts of commanders, the clang of grappling hooks, and the final mournful gurgle of a sinking ship would fill the air, painting a vivid picture of naval warfare. For the participants, the stakes were even higher. Escape from a sinking ship meant facing armed guards on the banks or drowning in the murky waters. Mercy, if granted, was even rarer than in gladiatorial combat, as the sheer scale of the event often meant a higher death toll was expected. You remember the general rules of arena combat. Well, for a naumachia, multiply the danger by 10. Historians still argue about the true frequency of these events. While early emperors staged several, their logistical difficulties and immense cost likely made them exceptional occurrences rather than regular fixtures. Was it a constant threat to gladiators or a once-in-a-lifetime or death-time experience for a select few? You'd have to conclude it was likely the latter, a truly unique, horrifying spectacle. Ultimately, the flooded arenas and naval battles represent the extreme lengths to which Roman emperors would go for public entertainment. For the participants, it was a terrifying, almost surreal deviation from their usual arena duties, demanding a different set of skills for survival. You are left with the astonishing image of a vast amphitheater transformed into a deadly lake, a testament to the Romans' insatiable appetite for spectacle, and the gladiators' willingness or compulsion to face death in any form, even on water. It was a watery grave and unforgettable performance. From the watery chaos of naval battles, your journey now moves into the subtle yet potent realm where gladiators, despite their slave status, became valuable tools. Political pawns, patrons, and power. You might imagine them as mere entertainers, but in Rome's volatile political landscape, a popular gladiator could wield surprising if indirect influence used by ambitious politicians to curry favor with the populace and project an image of strength and generosity. A mainstream historical fact you'll quickly learn is that gladiatorial games were almost always sponsored by wealthy individuals or politicians known as editori or patrons, who funded the spectacles. These games were incredibly expensive. Remember the costs of beast hunts and naumachia? But they were a powerful way to gain public popularity, demonstrate wealth, and build political support, especially during election seasons. You'd see a prominent senator beaming from his VIP box, basking in the adoration of the crowd, knowing that every clash of steel below added to his political capital. Now, for a quirky tidbit to further enhance their popularity, some patrons would not only fund games, but also personally train with gladiators, or even claim a famous gladiator as their champion. Imagine a Roman senator far removed from the dirt of the arena trying to awkwardly swing a gladius with a grizzled gladiator for a photo opportunity. It was a calculated move to associate themselves with the virility and excitement of the games, a form of ancient political marketing. You might hear whispers among the crowd, "Oh, look, Senator so-and-so is pretending to be tough again. I bet he couldn't last 5 seconds against that Murmillo." Historians still argue about the genuine interest versus pure political opportunism behind such gestures. The use of gladiators by politicians for influence was pervasive. A politician looking to win an election might promise grander games, more exotic animals, and a greater number of popular gladiators than his rival. The quality and scale of the games directly reflected on the patron's generosity and ability to deliver swaying public opinion. You'd witness the intense competition between sponsors, each trying to outdo the other with ever more spectacular and deadly shows. Gladiators, despite being property, remember their slave status, became unwitting symbols of their patron's power. Anterior. A gladiator's success in the arena reflected positively on his owner or sponsor, demonstrating their good fortune, their wealth, and their ability to command valuable assets. When you won, your victory was in a way also your patron's victory, solidifying his image in the public eye. Conversely, a patron's downfall could lead to the dispersal or even execution of their gladiatorial troupe. You might see a sudden chill in the ludus. When news of a patron's political disgrace arrived, knowing your own fate was tied to their fortunes. It was a symbiotic relationship, yet one inherently unbalanced by the gladiator's lack of agency. The close association between gladiators and political figures also led to accusations of corruption or bribery. Spectators might suspect that fights were fixed or that a popular gladiator was deliberately spared due to a patron's influence. While such instances were likely rare due to the inherent dangers and crowd expectations, the whispers of foul play would undoubtedly circulate. Historians still argue about the true extent of gladiators' political awareness. Were they oblivious pawns simply following orders, or did they understand their role in the political machinery, perhaps even quietly resenting their exploitation? You'd have to imagine a gladiator intelligent enough to survive the arena would certainly grasp the underlying power dynamics at play. Ultimately, gladiators were more than just fighters. They were political pawns, leveraged by ambitious men to gain and maintain power. Their lives and deaths, however brutal, served a larger purpose in the Roman political landscape, acting as living billboards for their patrons' influence and generosity. You are left with the image of men bleeding not just for survival, but for the unseen machinations of a vast political game, their bodies used as a bridge between the elite and the adoring masses. Moving from the intricate political chess games, your journey now highlights an even rarer and more fiercely debated corner of the arena. Women gladiators, rare fighters. You might think the roar of the crowd was exclusively for men. The truth is, while uncommon women also stepped onto the sand challenging Roman gender norms and captivating audiences with their audacity. Imagine a spectacle so compelling, so transgressive, that it both fascinated and repulsed Roman society. A mainstream historical fact you'll quickly grasp is that Roman texts and archaeological evidence confirm the existence of the female gladiators known as gladiatresses. Though they were rare, these women, typically slaves or women of low status, remember the infamous social status, fought in the arena, usually against other women or sometimes against wild animals. You'd feel a sense of defiance watching a woman clad in armor, wielding a weapon challenging the very notion of what a Roman woman should be. Their very presence was a radical act. Now, for a quirky tidbit to emphasize their exoticism and perhaps to diminish the perceived scandal of women fighting, gladiatresses were sometimes depicted without helmets or with their breasts exposed, highlighting their gender while still presenting them as fearsome warriors. Imagine a Roman artist trying to capture the essence of a female fighter, deliberately choosing to reveal her femininity in battle. It was a fascinating blend of titillation and raw power, designed to both shock and excite the audience. You might hear a Roman matron gasp, "My word, a woman fighting, and is she bare-breasted? How utterly scandalous. But do tell me, did she win?" Historians still argue whether the exposure was purely for artistic effect or also reflected practical combat attire in some cases. The fascinating, albeit rare, existence of female gladiators was controversial. Roman moralists often condemned their participation, viewing it as scandalous and a sign of societal decay. Emperors like Septimius Severus eventually banned their appearance in the arena in 200 CE, largely due to these moral objections rather than a lack of public interest. This ongoing debate about their role highlights the tension between Roman entertainment demands and traditional gender roles. When female gladiators did fight, they were often paired against each other, ensuring a fair contest of skill and strength. You'd witness their bouts with a heightened sense of novelty, recognizing that you were seeing something truly unusual and provocative. Their fighting styles likely mirrored those of their male counterparts, albeit perhaps adapted for different physiques. Their training would have been as rigorous as any male gladiator. Remember those training drills enduring the same discipline diet, barley and bruises, and the constant threat of death. They were likely housed in the same ludus barracks or in segregated sections, subject to the same strict control of the lanista. You'd feel a profound respect for their sheer tenacity and courage, daring to enter a profession so overwhelmingly male. The motivation for women to become gladiators could be similar to men: slavery punishment, or perhaps desperate financial necessity, winnings and debts. But for some free women, octorati, it might also have been a deliberate choice, a pursuit of fame, wealth, or an unconventional path to independence in a society with limited options for female agency. You might imagine a woman chafing against the constraints of Roman society, seeing the arena as a unique, if deadly, opportunity for self-expression. Historians still argue about the precise social background of most gladiatresses. Were they mainly foreign slaves, or did a significant number of Roman women choose this path? The evidence is scarce, leaving much open to interpretation and debate. Ultimately, the existence of women gladiators is a powerful testament to the multifaceted nature of Roman entertainment and the enduring human capacity for challenging norms. They were an audacious anomaly, captivating audiences with their strength and defiance even as they sparked moral outrage. You are left with a vivid image of these rare fighters stepping onto the sands, shattering expectations, and leaving an unforgettable, if brief, mark on the brutal history of the Roman arena. Their legacy is one of courage and controversy. From the audacious figures of women gladiators, your journey now shifts to how the lives of these brutal entertainers were enshrined and remembered. Legacy immortalized in art. You might think their stories faded with the roar of the crowd. The truth is, the gladiators' struggles, triumphs, and unique identities were captured by Roman artists in countless forms, ensuring their enduring presence long after their blood had soaked the sand. Imagine seeing their faces, their fighting styles, their very essence preserved in stone mosaic, and paint a testament to their profound impact on Roman society. A mainstream historical fact you'll quickly grasp is that gladiators were popular subjects in Roman art, depicted in mosaics, frescoes, lamps, tombstones, and even small figurines. These artistic representations weren't just decorative, they served as advertisements. Remember those libelli. From traveling shows, commemorative pieces, or tributes from fans and patrons. You'd find these images in grand villas, public baths, and even humble homes, showcasing the pervasive nature of gladiatorial culture in Roman daily life. It was like their faces were plastered everywhere, a ubiquitous presence in the Roman visual landscape. Now, for a quirky tidbit beyond formal art, gladiators' lives were often immortalized in graffiti, particularly in places like Pompeii, where fans scrawled not just declarations of love, those adoring masses, but also detailed records of fights, nicknames, and even humorous caricatures. Imagine seeing a rough yet spirited drawing of a specific gladiator battling a lion scratched into a wall by an enthusiastic fan. It was a raw, unfiltered form of public art, capturing the immediate excitement and personal connection people felt with their heroes of the arena. You might even spot a crude cartoon of a Dr. Ab, your old trainer, looking grumpy, a small act of irreverence. Historians still argue whether the most detailed graffiti was done by literate fans or perhaps by gladiators themselves. The way gladiators' lives were depicted in Roman art were varied. On the one hand, formal mosaics and reliefs often showed them in idealized heroic poses, powerful and almost godlike even in death. These images emphasize their strength skill and the glory of combat, stripping away the pain and the degradation of their slave status. You'd see gladiators frozen in moments of triumph, forever victorious, their musculature exaggerated, their armor gleaming. On the other hand, some art, particularly on tombstones, showed a more personal side. These might depict a gladiator with his weapons or simply his name, and the number of his victories a poignant record of a life dedicated to the sand. You'd feel a sense of solemn respect reading these inscriptions, recognizing the human beneath the helmet, remembering their journey from raw recruit to a formidable fighter. The Rostinos types of gladiators as were meticulously depicted, showcasing their distinctive armor and weaponry. A glance at a mosaic could instantly tell you if you were looking at a Murmello, a Thraex, or a Retiarius, highlighting the specific visual identity of each fighter. This precision in detail reflected the Roman audience's deep knowledge and appreciation for the intricacies of the games. It was like an ancient encyclopedia of fighting styles, all captured in vibrant stone or paint. Even the ludus itself and scenes of training, remember those training drills could be found in art, offering glimpses into the daily lives of gladiators away from the spotlight. You might see a fresco of men practicing against a palus, or a small bronze statuette of a gladiator mid-parry, freezing a moment of their grueling routine. Historians still argue about the extent to which these artistic depictions were accurate representations of actual gladiators versus idealized or propagandistic portrayals. Did artists strive for realism, or did they primarily aim to enhance the spectacle and the fame of the fighters? You'd have to consider that, like modern celebrity portraits, a certain amount of flattering exaggeration was likely involved. Ultimately, the way gladiators were immortalized in art ensures that their legacy lives on far beyond the collapse of the Roman Empire. Their images, etched into the very fabric of Roman society, continue to speak of courage, brutality, and the enduring human fascination with spectacle and sacrifice. You are left with the powerful sense that these fighters, though often despised in life, found a strange and lasting form of immortality through the very art that celebrated their bloody profession, ensuring their echo continues through time. From the vivid artistry that immortalized gladiators, your journey now concludes by surveying the physical spaces that once hosted their brutal dances, the aftermath, arena's quiet. You find yourself standing in the ruins of a Roman amphitheater, the vast stone edifice silent and weathered, its ancient roar long since faded to a whisper. This isn't just a collection of crumbling walls, it's a profound echo chamber holding the memories of countless lives, deaths and spectacles now left to the quiet contemplation of time. A mainstream historical fact you'll confront is that most Roman amphitheaters, once bustling centers of entertainment, eventually fell into ruin, repurposed for other uses, or had their valuable stone plundered for new construction. The Colosseum in Rome, for example, served as a quarry for centuries after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. You'd see grass growing where blood once flowed, birds nesting where emperors once sat, a stark testament to the impermanence of even the grandest human endeavors. Now, for a quirky tidbit, despite their eventual decay, the mere silent ruins of arenas like the Colosseum or the amphitheater in Pompeii still hold surprising traces of their former lives. You might find remnants of the gladiators' barracks beneath the seating or the intricate machinery for lifts and traps that brought animals and scenery into the arena floor. Imagine stepping into a dark subterranean passage and knowing that desperate gladiators and roaring beasts once walked the very same path before their terrifying debut. It's like finding the backstage area of a deadly theater long after the final curtain has fallen. You might even discover faded graffiti, remember those adoring masses on a preserved wall, a last whisper from a forgotten fan. Historians still argue about the exact methods used to operate the complex lifting mechanisms that brought large animals into the arena. The gladiators' enduring memory is palpable in these quiet spaces. You walk across the former arena, imagining the shouts of the crowd, the clang of steel, the desperate gasps of the dying. The very air seems to hum with the ghosts of past performances, a solemn testament to the thousands of lives that were lived and lost for entertainment. It's a place of contemplation, forcing you to reconcile the brutality with the grand scale of human ambition and spectacle. These ruins stand as powerful monuments not just to Roman engineering, but to the darker aspects of human nature: the fascination with violence, the desire for entertainment, and the willingness to sacrifice lives for spectacle. You feel the weight of that history, the unsettling beauty of a place where life was cheap and death was celebrated. The silence of the arena is profound. No longer filled with the frenzied cries of the crowd, it allows for reflection. You might ponder the individual stories of the gladiators, remember their love, and lost their hopes for freedom, the wooden sword and their simple desires, wine and revelry. These silent ruins become a canvas for your imagination, populated by the figures whose lives were inextricably linked to these very stones. Even without the live spectacle, the arenas continue to draw crowds today, albeit for very different reasons. You'd see tourists wandering through the arches, marveling at the scale, learning about the history. The thirst for understanding the gladiatorial world, even in its aftermath, remains as strong as the ancient Roman desire for entertainment. Historians still argue about the precise moment in time when the gladiatorial games truly ceased to be a significant form of entertainment across the Roman Empire. Was it the rise of Christianity, economic decline, or a gradual shift in public taste? You'd have to conclude it was likely a combination of factors, a slow, inevitable fading of a brutal tradition. Ultimately, the arena's quiet is not an empty silence, but one filled with the resonant echoes of a bygone era. The crumbling stones and overgrown grass are not just physical remnants. They are powerful reminders of the enduring human capacity for both cruelty and courage, spectacle, and sacrifice. You are left with a lasting image of these magnificent yet chilling ruins, standing as eternal monuments to the quirky lives of those who fought, bled, and died for the roar of the Roman crowd, their memory forever etched into the very stones of the arena. From the silent, weathered stones of the ancient arenas, your journey now bridges the millennia, pulling the gladiators' stories into the vibrant tapestry of the present. Modern echoes, pop culture gladiators. You might think their world is long gone, confined to history books. The truth is, the Roman gladiator, with all his contradictions and brutal allure, has been resurrected countless times, captivating new audiences through films, literature, and even video games, shaping our collective imagination in profound ways. A mainstream historical fact you'll immediately observe is the significant impact of films like Gladiator 2020 on popularizing and romanticizing the image of the Roman gladiator. This movie, along with countless others, has shaped how millions visualize these ancient fighters, often portraying them as noble heroes, fighting for freedom distinct from the historical reality of their slave status. You'd see the iconic imagery of a lone fighter standing against impossible odds, a powerful narrative that resonates deeply with modern audiences. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the fascination with gladiators has even extended to modern sports, with professional wrestlers adopting gladiator-inspired personas, or sports teams taking on gladiator-themed mascots and names. Imagine a hulking modern athlete stepping into a brightly lit arena, complete with a plastic helmet and a foam sword, drawing direct inspiration from the ancient warriors. It's like a bizarre yet undeniably popular form of historical cosplay, proving that the gladiatorial spirit, albeit sanitized, still sells tickets. You might hear a commentator booming, "And in this corner, the undefeated Retirius," ready to net his opponent. Historians still argue whether such modern adaptations help or hinder accurate historical understanding of gladiatorial life. The cross connection between their ancient lives and their representation in today's media is often one of selective appropriation. Modern pop culture tends to focus on the heroism, the struggle for freedom, the wooden sword, and the spectacle of combat, often glossing over the harsh realities of their slave status. Those chains and contracts, the grim discipline, flogging and fines, or the sheer brutality that rarely allowed for a truly honorable death. You'd witness this romanticized version, a powerful narrative that prioritizes drama over documentary accuracy. Video games allow you to become a gladiator, experiencing simulated combat training routines, those training drills, and even managing a ludus. This interactive engagement allows for a deeper, albeit fictionalized, immersion into their world, letting you wield the gladius and feel the virtual roar of the crowd. It's a compelling way to engage with history, even if it's filtered through a digital lens. Beyond entertainment, the gladiator has become a powerful metaphor in modern language and culture. You hear phrases like gladiatorial combat to describe fierce political debates or facing the lions for confronting overwhelming challenges. Their story has transcended its historical context to become a universal symbol of struggle, courage, and performance under pressure. The archaeological discoveries like the gladiatorial barracks in Pompeii or new findings about their diet, barley, and bruises continue to fuel this modern fascination, providing fresh details that sometimes confirm and often contradict our popular imaginings. You realize that the more we learn, the richer and more complex their story becomes, constantly challenging our preconceived notions. Historians still argue about the ethical responsibilities of media producers when portraying historical events like gladiatorial games. Should accuracy always take precedence over narrative appeal, or is it acceptable to adapt for entertainment purposes? You'd have to consider that popular media plays a huge role in shaping public perception for better or worse. Ultimately, the myri modern echoes of the Roman gladiators resonate profoundly in our contemporary world. They are more than just historical figures. They are enduring cultural archetypes, symbols of a brutal yet compelling past that continues to fascinate and inspire. You are left with a powerful sense of their omnipresence, how these ancient warriors whose lives ended violently in dusty arenas have achieved a unique and pervasive form of immortality through the ceaseless churn of pop culture. Their story, however grim its reality, will continue to be told again and again as long as humans seek heroes in the face of impossible odds. The final image of the gladiators battling not just in the arena, but across the screens of time begins to gently fade. The distant clatter of modern keyboards and the faint hum of electronics replace the imagined clang of steel. Their lives, once defined by the sand and blood of ancient Rome, now drift into the tranquil realm of collective memory. Let the stories of their struggles and their surprising moments of humanity, their quiet courage and their enduring legacy settle within you. The fierce dedication of the doctors, the unwavering belief in charms, the fleeting comfort of comradeship. All these details soften and blend into a calming whisper from the past. You can almost feel the gentle sweep of the desert wind over forgotten arenas, carrying their echoes away into the peaceful night. Breathe deeply, softly. There is quiet rest in knowing these stories, a sense of connection to lives lived long ago. May your own dreams be filled with peace and the gentle flow of history. Sweet dreams.